Hello, puppies and kittens, and welcome to another episode of Atheists. No, it's not Atheist Bible Study. That's that other guy. Blasphemers Bible.
New year, new drink, huh, Aaron?
It's a breakfast beer.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, bread is a breakfast food.
Exactly.
They have like a cinnamon toast version for your early morning.
Yeah, there's eggs and milk in chocolate cake.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
We should really
Yeah,
write a
welcome
book on
everyone.
nutrition.
Yeah, and
we can say welcome to the Blasphemers Bible chat, so that it's a nice acronym.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, the BBC.
I said if
Isaac and I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so I mentioned in the chat that if you have questions, Ayaan has the answer. Not really, better tag at gonna go for it. But some people didn't know what I was talking about there. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who was quite a famous atheist a decade or more ago, 12 or more years ago. She recently, I guess I don't know, ran out of money being an atheist or something and decided to turn Christian for reasons that make no sense at all. So
was it her who made the argument that Christianity was a better force against Islam, sort of thing?
Yeah, because you fight superstitious mysticism with superstitious mysticism, not realizing that every law we lay down to aid Christianity in this country will only be used in the Islamofication of this country were that to happen. No, secularism is the only way to combat both, Islam and Christian nationalism, which she doesn't seem to understand or seems to have fully embraced. So I'm a little curious about that.
I don't know her.
It seems that her ultimate she's very much against Islam, but then she's also simultaneously very much against wokeism.
The woke, yeah. Who's gonna fight the woke, Aaron? If not for Christians.
Yeah.
And I'm a little confused as to how a black immigrant woman from Islamic background, how she has the particular attitude against woke that she does. But
if that's what she's selling, then I'm inclined to believe she's just a grifter. I didn't grow up in Islam, but I know some of the things that women go through when they do, and I can understand the desperation of trying to find a strong ally against something horrible. But selling the bit about wokeism is a pretty obvious line that it's just a fucking grift.
Yeah.
It's very possible that her first audience, even though she was an atheist, would have been mostly, not mostly, but a lot of them would have been Christians who would have seen her as a anti-Islamic figure, and so therefore they would have surrounded her. And then she's like, oh, all of my supporters are more right-wing, anti-woke, blah blah blah, and all of the woke people don't like me because I'm Islamophobic. So she would have
there's that.
those people. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if she was Islamophobic at the beginning, but she would have been seen as by a lot of people.
She would have been labeled. There's a really important point with Islamophobia that I think it bears noticing, because of the people I listen to, the person that I am, I know the difference between arguing against a person and an idea. You don't have the right to exist is not the same thing as you're wrong and you're being an idiot. But that being said, I live in Canada. There was a terrorist attack against an Islamic family that does and should fall under Islamophobia during the early part of the pandemic, when families would take walks, just them, not get near anyone else, and a man drove a car, killed an entire family except a little boy, and into this just because Islam and Muslims and brown people. And so you have this hatred of people, which is vile, but then you also have this hatred of an idea, which is completely fucking justified by the contents of the idea and the history of the idea. that doesn't justify anything that man did or any kind of violence against ordinary people.
Now you're talking about the recent event in Bourbon Street, right?
No, this one I'm talking about was not that recent.
Didn't you say this one happened in Canada, or did I mishear that?
Yeah, or well, how long ago was that actually? It was a little while ago. The most recent collisions I've heard have been attacks in the States, and that one.
Yeah.
There's
a difference between people. There's a difference between people being labeled Islamophobic when they actually have legitimate criticism of Islam, the Quran, and people that use legitimate criticism of Islam and the Quran to fuel their Islamophobia.
Yeah. And I like what Penn Jillette said. Love and respect all people, hate and destroy all faith. I don't know if I entirely agree with him, but it's a good slogan. And I think it breaks it down.
Yeah, I like it. And when you mentioned the, somebody using a car as a weapon, and I brought up the Bourbon Street thing because I thought that's what you were talking about. They're American-born, American vet runs over a bunch of people because he's decided to go with ISIS. So he's an Islamic terrorist, but he's an American vet. And so Trump announces that this is, that crime is at the worst level that anybody's ever seen. And so the immigrants that are coming over are causing all of these terror. This wasn't an immigrant. And crime still is at violent crime is at one of the lowest points it's been in 50 years. And nobody holds this guy to account. So when they correct him, he doubles down. Just continuously keep telling that lie even after you know it's false. That's religion too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of the Gish Gallop, a technique you, having argued with creationists, are very familiar with, I'm sure, where the person just spouts so much bullshit that there isn't time in the debate to correct all of their nonsense. So It sounds like you didn't answer them.
Yeah, it's like you can't always address everything that's wrong with something because it's like, wow, there's just too much. Where do I even start?
Yeah. So I got a couple comments to read. Matt White says, Aaron, per your series on Mike Johnson, he began Congress claiming Jefferson used a specific prayer. Monticello itself labels this as spurious.
Wow.
Keep telling the lie until people believe it, even when you know it's a lie, even when a bunch of people have already corrected you. It doesn't matter how many people correct you. Just keep repeating the lie and people will forget that it was corrected. Or they'll believe it anyway. I've heard that said enough times by all the most evil people in the world.
Is this the same Jefferson Bible where he cut out all the stupid stuff and it's about this big?
It didn't cut out all the stupid stuff, just the supernatural stuff. There's plenty of stupid left in the Bible after you cut that out.
The supernatural and the horrifically morally repugnant. Those are both pretty big chunks.
Yep.
What's fascinating is that he would do that, and like no Christian would do something like that today. But these people were like that critical that they would like remove stuff out because they thought, hey, there's no chance that this is actually true.
Because he wasn't a Christian.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So then Satan 616 offers, 25 Romanian lei. Thank you. I wish you all another happy, faithless new year. Much love to you all and keep on doing this wonderful live stream. Thank you so much for that, Satan 616.
Yeah, we didn't even tell people Happy New Year. This is the first stream of the year.
Oh yeah, Happy New Year.
I because I don't believe in false hope.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
That's valid. Okay, well then, courage to the new year.
Yeah.
Fight to the death.
I hope you all have a terrible time this next go around the sun. Especially Peter.
I need my sword.
Which you posted in oncoming adversity.
Lawrence, which you posted in the actual first live stream Arn did in this year.
That's true.
So it's not the first, it's the second.
A bad year.
Yeah, see?
All right, so now we are doing, what is it? It's 1 kings multiplied by 4 squared, right? In parentheses?
Close enough.
Yeah, I think Tomer's taking that because he's like, wow, he did some math.
Yeah.
Almost.
He's very proud of you.
Uh-huh.
All right. So who is reading today?
I think Isaac should read this because I've heard his excitement over this chapter. He was really like, "Oh, this is such an important thing. Oh, it's Omri. I love Omri. I want to marry Omri or something like that."
Yeah, I could swear he said that.
That's the next chapter, but I'll do.
Okay.
I'll do
So you want to read the next chapter? Do you, Isaac?
No, it's fine. I don't mind.
Okay.
It's just as boring as this one. So
It's.
It's the Bible. We got to make it interesting.
I mean, how interesting is? And then this guy was killed by this man, and he became king, and then.
And they begat that guy.
Basically
who killed that other guy.
That's basically every history of every kingdom that existed.
Yeah,
Oh,
betrayal.
No, is this chapter? Okay.
Yeah. So read.
Incidentally, everyone admire my sword for what you can see of it. I got it from my father.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Wow, it's a katana.
Can we get
so.
No.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Katana, all right.
Wow.
Did you leave
Every sword is a katana.
Cancelled.
Yes.
You absolute. Somebody hit him. Who's closest?
I know how to annoy people.
Congratulations, you're a troll.
Where should I read until?
My first time. Yeah, read up to 22.
22. Okay. The word of God came to Yehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha. Before I lifted you up from the dust and made you a ruler over my people Israel, but you followed the ways of Jeroboam and caused my people Israel to sin, provoking my anger with their sins. I am going to sweep away Baasha and his house. I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in the town shall be devoured by dogs, and anyone belonging to him who dies in the open country shall be devoured by the birds of the sky. The other events of Baasha's reign and his actions and his exploits are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. And that's annals, not anals. We'll get to that later.
Thank you for the correction, because you know where mine went.
Okay, verse 6. Baasha rested with his ancestors and was buried in Tirzah. His son Elah succeeded him as king. But the word of God had come through the prophet Yehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha and against his house, that it would fare like the house of Jeroboam, which he himself had struck down. Jeroboam. Because of all the evil he did that was displeasing to God, provoking anger with his deeds. In the 26th year of King Asa of Judah, Elah, son of Baasha, became king over Israel at Tirzah for 2 years. His officer, Zimri, commander of half the chariotry, committed treason against him while he was at Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arza, who was in charge of the palace at Tirzah. Zimri entered, struck him down, and killed him. He succeeded him as king in the 27th year of King Asa of Judah. No sooner had he become king and ascended the throne, then he struck down all the house of Baasha. He did not leave a single male of his, nor any kin or friend.
Male here is pisser against the wall.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
No.
Thus, Zimri destroyed all the house of Baasha in accordance with the words that God had spoken through the prophet Yehu. Because of the sinful acts that Baasha and his son Elah committed, and that they caused Israel to commit, provoking the anger of the Eternal, the God of Israel, with their false gods. The other events of Elah's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. During the 27th year of King Asa of Judah, Zimri reigned in Tirzah for 7 days.
Okay,
at the time,
within the anus of the king, and now we're going to King Asa.
King Asa. Yeah, King Asa of Judah.
Yeah,
so King Asa reigned. We spoke about him before, and he reigned for quite a while. So all of these kings of Israel are going to be like, when they became king, is going to be referenced against which year in the reign of King Asa it happened. So, yeah. So we're using King Asa as a reference when we're talking about the Israelite kings.
You're saying his reign was thick.
Yeah, this is also generally how they kept time.
Yeah, he was king
years.
for a longer Asa time.
By the ass.
Oh my god.
It's a genealogy, Tomer. It's that or we all fall asleep on stream.
Yeah. During the 27th year of King Asa of Judah, Zimri reigned in Tirzah for 7 days. At the time, the troops were encamped at Gibbethon of the Philistines. When the troops who were encamped there learned that Zimri had committed treason and had struck down the king, that very day in the camp, all Israel acclaimed the army commander, Omri, king over Israel. Omri and all Israel then withdrew from Gibbethon and laid siege to Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the town was taken, he went into the citadel of the royal palace and burned down the royal palace over himself. So he died.
Damn.
Because of the sins that he committed and caused Israel to commit, doing what was displeasing to God and following the ways of Yerovam. The other events of Zimri's reign, all 7 days, and the treason that he committed are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. Then the people of Israel split into 2 factions. A part of the people followed Tivni, son of Kinaf, to make him king, and the other part followed Omri.
22.
Okay. Those who followed Omri proved stronger than those who followed Tivni, son of Kinaf, and Tivni died, and Omri became king. Yeah.
You notice what I notice about all of this divine word of the ultimate God of loving forgiveness and peace. The one God for all mankind, creator of the universe, and he loves us all so much. I've noticed that there's no stories about people coming together, working together to achieve great things. Everybody's killing everybody else over the slightest infraction, or imagined or otherwise. But there's nothing about how we can come together and achieve. Well, no, wait, there was that one, the Tower of Babel. But then God fucked that up, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he shut that shit down immediately.
By the way, I'm drinking cold water from a mug. Eat your heart out.
And not to mention that
water too from a bottle.
Wow.
Not to mention that this God seems to be perfectly fine with combating what he calls sin with like more sin or evil stuff. Like, how does that make any sense? All right, they're sinning, so therefore we're going to let them starve to death and then be attacked and be slain by some other guy who then takes the crown. Like, what is that? That's not.
So 2 wrongs do make a right?
It seems like. In Jehovah's books or Yahweh's books, but let's face it, he's not exactly your best moral example.
The kings of Israel
he may actually be the worst.
The kings of Israel were just like a lesson for the kings of Judah to look at, you know.
Yeah,
they weren't real players.
That's how they're basically written.
Yeah, they're just NPCs.
And the thing is, like, we're going to get. I mean, it's not. We haven't gotten to it so far in this chapter, but once we get to Ahab is kind of the prototype for vilifying Manasseh later. There have been a lot of parallels that have been noted between them. And like, even though Ahab is said to be the worst of the worst, in I think I forget if it's no, I think it's in Chronicles. No, I think it's just in Second Kings. Once we get to Manasseh, he's gonna say like, oh, he's even worse than Ahab. So like, there's an interesting thing I'll get to once we get to that part. But
I think Zimri is also this Zimri is also like seems to be like a prototype for someone who rebels against like the one true rebel or something like that. Like, I don't know what the word is, but like he fights against his king and he becomes king, and then he's killed 7 days later. He's like the prototype of that. Maybe not prototype, maybe it's a different forerunner or whatever.
It sounds like a very tumultuous time in Israel's history, but we do have to keep in mind, aside from things like rebellions, which might be a little harder to fake, this is also all written, from the Judah. Look at those Israelites who are so much worse than us, and God's smiting them. That's why, they were taken over and we weren't, because we are better, yada, yada, yada attitude. So yeah, the trope was invented just to piss on whoever was king in Israel at that moment, which apparently changed rather frequently.
Yeah, I mean, there could still be a grain of truth to, like, that the royal family of Israel wasn't very secure, and it did change hands more often. I mean, it's possible that the Judah line is unbroken all the way to Solomon, let's say, but I don't think we have any evidence of that. So,
Well,
Alma gives a comment, says, but those people were evil. Don't matter that all people are supposed to have come from the same family he saved from the flood.
Yeah, fair enough.
God,
So,
yeah.
apparently the pre-flood people were so awful. Jesus Christ, that was loud.
By the way, as far as I understand, there must have been another like vessel that survived the flood, possibly a metal submarine, because it says that Tubal-Cain was the ancestor of all people that make metal, all metal workers or something. So they must have
Maybe
somehow
more like the
survived.
patron god by the sound
I know.
of it.
It's a funny.
Oh, yeah. No, well, hey, yeah. They were supposed to be super long-lived geniuses, right? Who knows? Maybe they did put together a submarine.
Well, just so we don't stray too far from the path, I do want to point out that unless I'm misremembering, and in my tired state, I totally could be, but I think Omri is the earliest person in the Bible that we have contemporary evidence for, contemporary extra biblical evidence.
Yes.
Yeah. So
from
this is from the Mesha Steel. Yeah. So I do have a translation right here. So if I could just read it here. So this is from the 9th century. So this is the Mesha Steel describes the exploits of King Mesha of Moab, who credits King Omri of Israel with capturing large segments of Moabite territory. Assyrian sources continued to call Israel the land of Omri long after his death, attesting to his impact on the region. And archaeologically, that also seems to be the case. In fact, was it Finkelstein and Silverman in their book Bible on Earth? They have a whole section on it, on the dynasty of King Omri. So this is the translation of the steel. Omri was king of Israel and oppressed Moab during many days, and Shamash was angry with his aggressions. Shamash said to me, "Go, take Nebo against Israel." And I went in the night and fought against it from the break of day until noon, and I took it. I killed in all 7,000 men, but I did not kill the women and maidens, for I devoted them to Ashtar Shamash. I took from it the vessels of Yahweh and offered them before Shamash, and the king of Israel fortified Yahaz and occupied it when he made war against me, and Shamash drove him out before me. Yeah, so we do have a contemporary reference to King Omri's military exploits.
Oh, there you go.
Is that an example of Ishtar? No, what was it? Ashtarte? What did you say?
Ashtoreth.
Yeah, Ashtoreth, Astarte.
Yeah, is that an example of Ashtoreth being like a generic term for the wife of a god? Or is that was
or the divine feminine? They were all devoted to her service, so
yeah. It was interesting to see an Ashtarte of Shamash, or Shemesh, the god of the sun. And I didn't know that he also had an Ashtoreth or whatever. Yeah, makes sense.
I mean, that seems to be the common theme, where these gods would have a female consort or a female counterpart of some sort.
Yeah, there was supposed to be a male and a female aspect of every major thing, because you just had more range that way.
It's I'm just wondering if it's possible that it's like, she Ashtoreth was her own goddess, and then because she was the what's the word, not the concubine of the king, of the god, the partner, whatever,
consort.
Consort, yeah, that's the right word. The consort of El, and then like other kingdoms would have preferred other gods that they called their gods consort Ashtar as well.
And you know what's kind of funny with Yahweh, right? Like we do have, of course, Yahweh and his Asherah, right?
Yeah, and his
But at the same time, so for a while, of course, that disappears. But then later on, Yahweh again gets another feminine aspect. He gets the Shekinah later on.
Oh.
And also, well, okay, there are some references.
It's
yeah,
not. It's
yeah.
not a consort. It's not a consort,
Yeah.
but it is
It's a feminine aspect.
divine aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're ready. That's probably after they already like made him into a monotheistic.
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Or,
Yeah.
Or just.
But they were like, you know what? We're missing.
A woman's.
We're missing those daddy's titties.
So damn straight. Which I do have a shirt for. We do have a daddy milker shirt.
Of
So
course you do.
initially, Yahweh had Asherah's pole, which is interesting, and then he got Shakira.
Yeah, he wishes.
Yeah, he wishes indeed.
I also wish.
All right, got comments from Nauhart, who offers 100 Swedish kroner. Thank you. It says, reading the Bible is strangely comforting because I can write better as a garbage fiction writer and poet, and I'm not believed to be divine, nor is my work considered sacred.
I just want to say that it's bugging me that people say that the Bible is either garbage or like they can write a better thing than the Bible. It's like it's a book written like 2,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago. Like it's not. How do I say
Well,
this?
what do you have to say about the Quran then?
It's 1,400, but like
They had a bit more. They had a bit more time to develop, the literary.
Yeah, but
Also,
I mean,
I'd say it's worse. Literary.
My point is that in my opinion, the Bible as a literary, as literature stands for itself, right? I mean, I read the actual Hebrew, right? It's not just like what we're reading here. There's actually
a reason why people
good
like
stuff there, in my opinion.
And there's a reason
right?
why people like the which version is it? The
KJV.
like the KJV version because of the way it sounds.
It's poetic
it's a
and
bad
grand.
Translation.
Yeah,
right.
Which is a stupid reason to like a translation, but
well, it depends what you want.
Right,
if you want
exactly.
entertainment, then no, it isn't. If you want ritual that lets you just kind of go in the flow of it, it's a good option. If you want historicity, which is what you're going for as a scholar, then no, it's absolute crap.
Yeah.
But that isn't the point of it.
When you translate any text, you either have to go for accuracy or tone, and if you go for tone, you're not going to be accurate. If you go for accuracy, it's going to sound really shit, and that's what most people are used to. Here is a translation that actually says what it says, but you're missing out on all the original, musicality or whatever.
I get what the comment is saying
musical,
about,
but
I get what the comment is saying about tone and quality of writing too, but also these aren't that the same genre. I mean, maybe it would have been better if they wrote them as proper novels, the way you get in Ruth or Esther or the bit about never mind. But the whole thing is, these are different genres and they're translated. But you miss a lot of narrative aspects in that format. It's better to compare it to like your history textbook in grade 10.
Yeah, and I totally agree with the whole like it's a bunch of different genres, right? So like once we get to Esther, like you might like the story more. I personally like the story of Jonah. I think that's a pretty funny story.
It's hilarious.
I
You
like
don't have to
both.
take it literally.
Yeah, so like
Esther's like I would say I always consider it badly written. Like it's a good story, badly written, because like you have all of the action and interesting stuff quite well done, and then it's only like a third of the book, and then the rest of it is just repetitive and boring and stupid.
I'm seeing the comments piling up.
Okay, put comments.
Okay, so Mubarak. Hey, Mubarak. Offers $49.99. Thank you very much. I feel like a discount. Chat from last stream. As an ex-Muslim from the Middle East that is working on building a community from ex-believers in the Middle East, sorry, I butchered that. Ayaan Hirsi Ali became a Christian just to be an open anti-Muslim is very devastating to our community.
Oh,
Yeah, that's also very true.
that does suck. I'm sorry. because there's the whole culture associated with the religion, and people want to keep the culture and traditions and food and funny little sayings from when they were young, and it's really crappy that she's doing that. I'm sorry.
Then Nauhart offers another 50 Swedish kroner and says, with all due respect to Tomer, I disagree. The Bible is marketed as a work of divinity.
There is a difference between how the Bible is marketed and between what the Bible is actually. Like, I really don't care what the Bible is marketed as. It is still a literature from ancient times. It is still worth merit, right? It just because it is marketed as some like divine stuff doesn't mean that it is less valuable as literature or as
I think we all understand both sides of this statement.
Yeah. But it is important to point those out, not to the people who are regarding it as we are, as a historical document, but to the people who try and tell you that the Bible is the best book ever written and it's the word of God and everything's literal, or who say the same thing about the Quran, that it's the best book ever written and blah, 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 and it's God and it's divine. No, it's crap. Stop it.
You can't write a better book.
Yeah, Shakespeare wrote dozens of better
books. And you can
than
write something better than the Bible. I mean, yes, obviously the Bible is different books by different authors, but take whichever one you think is the best. I'm sure there's a contemporary book that is better written.
I'm saying people who need to hear those kinds of criticisms are the people who are making the ridiculous claims. And if judged against those ridiculous claims, yeah, of course, it's crap. It's crap for something meant to be written by a god, not for an ancient document. For an ancient document, it's got all kinds of really valuable information and lots of things can be extrapolated from it, and it's affected history. It's really interesting. It's only the inflated claims that need to be responded to with that kind of black and white thinking, because
the comments
are still comments stacking up for Shadow Nor.
No, you skipped that one.
I skipped one.
Yeah.
Dara O'Kane. Okay, there we go. Says we need a new religion with Yahweh, Zeus, flying spaghetti monster, Odin, all having to share the world. It makes more sense that way. 500 years time, that is the religion.
Sounds like you could make a comic out of it.
Yep.
Yeah, there's definitely fiction works out like a god dies when the last believer of his dies.
Then Shadow Noir offers $20 and says, so fun hanging out with y'all. Thank you. And then SJL says, I probably can't write better literature than the Bible. I can easily write better morality. Indeed. And then Matt White says, Lawrence, I live in Yorkshire, where we do have folk who talk like KJV.
That's unfortunate.
They still use the thee and thou in Yorkshire. It's if you've ever read James Herriot's book, you can see.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think they say thou. I think it's kind of like the.
Well, yeah, they don't use the full. It's
kind of. Yeah.
That not about it's kind of a thing. It's almost like a bit of Scottish in there, but not fully.
I mean to visit Yorkshire.
Well, they're kind of close.
I haven't been yet. Yes, relatively close. Closer than anyone here for sure.
Off similar bits of the word, not always the same, but similar.
Okay, Jordy's out of time. All right, and then Nauhart. Wait, I read that one. Nope.
No,
I
you didn't.
Yep. Nauhart offers another 50 Swedish kroner. Thanks again, and says, "Thank you for your response, and hopefully I did not come across as antagonistic." No, that's my job.
No, you weren't. I've seen way worse comments, way more antagonistic than this. But yeah.
All right, and then Matt White says, Aaron, per the divine feminine, I'd heard the name of God being Yah, the male, and Eva, the feminine of Adam and Eve, Yah.
Compare
Yah
Adam and
has
Eve
definitely been
Eva.
a short form for Yahweh, that's for sure.
Yeah,
It's Yah.
Male
Okay.
and Eva the feminine. Oh, Yah is the
the
male
Reformed
and
Egyptian
Eva the
came back.
feminine.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to bring up to Lawrence. I mean, somebody shared with me this thing about how these Zeus, for example, was Zeus the father or Father Zeus, which is like Zeus Pater, which is
Zeus Pater,
Jupiter, which is Jupiter.
Yeah. Yo, Zeus, Theos. It's all the same.
I'd always wondered how that transition happened.
Well, the thing is, so the Greeks used a couple titles for not just titles, a couple names for Zeus. So they would use Zeus, but because it used to be, it might be linked. I'm not actually sure, but they also use Dios.
Yes.
For Zeus.
Sort of the god.
Yeah, it's literally
god.
It's the Indo-European word for God. Theos.
Sure.
Theos.
And there might be some link between that and how Zeus would have been pronounced in like the archaic period, which would have been Zeus, like a ZD. So it used to be pronounced Zeus, and then it became Zeus, but then they also had Dios.
Okay.
Interesting.
Continue, Isaac.
I have comments. Yeah.
Let's go.
Weird how people always forget about me. It's almost like I never exist.
Which is why we made you a t-shirt.
Yet. Okay, so on verses 1 through 4, Fritz comments, the word sent to the prophet Yehu, son of Hanani, announcing the destruction of the family of Baasha, is interpolated between the two formulas. This threat is closely related to similar words against the royal households of Israel, as we see in 14:7 through 11, 21 through 24, 2 Kings 9:7 through 10, and expresses DH's understanding of history. History is the execution of the word of God, spoken by the prophet. Nothing important happened because of some political, sociological, personal, or similar constellation of events, but only because Yahweh has decreed so through one of his prophets. The metaphorical speech corresponds essentially to 1 Kings 14:10 and 11, 21, 23, and 24, and 2 Kings 9:10. Here, the same fate repeats itself. The warrior chosen by God for the worship of Yahweh follows the sin of Jeroboam and has to be punished. Thus, the words of the prophets express the Deuteronomistic view of history and are later additions.
Valid point. But I have a question with regard to the prophecy being basically God, things happen because God speaks them into being, because we're all in invocation. Is that why the prophets being, the channel of God, would people think that if a prophet said something that would make it happen? Or was he predicting? Or was it kind of both? Could you force him to say something else and then something else would happen because he's the one with the magic words? Or
I mean, he can lie.
That's true.
We will see that later.
It does
right?
feel a bit like God sends a message or a prophecy, and then he seems to actually influence events so that they turn out the right way. She's like, oh, this king was bad, he's evil, I'm going to wipe out his family. And then the guy dies peacefully, and then God is like, okay, his son has to be evil as well so that I can kill him.
Yeah, I can see some of that.
Yeah.
Although on verse 4 there, it might also itself be there might be a possible link there to the Persian period as well, because so when it says that anyone belonging to Baasha will who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat. So one of the ways that the Persians often got rid of bodies was by throwing them out to dogs, and they actually have this practice about when you turn 70, I think they were like, you're too old to be in society, so they just kind of left you out in the wilderness to die, to get eaten by dogs. And the thing is that I read that a while ago in Olmsted's book on Persia, on ancient Persia, and I was like, wow, that is fucking brutal.
Yeah, it's a bit like that comedy series, Norsemen or something. It's like Vikings, but like a comedy version, where they're the beginning of the show is like, okay, take a rock and jump off a cliff or whatever it was.
But I'm only 47. I'm not that old.
Yeah.
Ah,
Okay, on verse 2,
By the way,
I live.
Aaron,
Sorry.
just a second. Aaron, can you put on your the screen that you had before when you left? What is it?
I had
It's
to
a
put on
picture
my
of one of
screen
you.
before I what?
Oh, he's asking what the picture is in your when you close down your camera.
It is.
and
You
you
had a
get the
snake,
little-
I think.
I have no
was a
idea. It's probably
reptile.
something my wife put up. Let me
No, I
see.
think it's
That's Lilandra's lizard.
Yeah, that's I was
Yep.
that's a lizard.
it's a bearded dragon, right?
Yep.
It
Oh,
still
okay, so it's
sounds
not a
though
newt,
like
because someone in the comments was
prophet
like,
could make something happen.
someone in the I think it was Matt White in the comments said, "Oh, Aaron turned into a newt. Oh, he got better."
Mm.
Ah, I turned him into a newt.
Okay.
False nose. for that.
Okay.
Come
Okay. Yeah. So on verse 2, I lifted you up from the dust. DeVries calls this phrase, quote, melodramatic and theologically problematic in Yahweh's mouth to someone who murdered his master, end quote. The phrase occurs in 1 Samuel 2:8, i.e. Hannah's prayer, and Psalms 113:7. McKenzie, the new commentator, notes Brueggemann's opinion that the expression is part of an enthronement formula, which he used to interpret the creation of Adam from dust in Genesis 2 and 3. He notes, however, that this expression is not found for any other king in the Book of Kings.
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure about that. It reads to me like he's just trying to say, you know, you came from very humble beginnings and I raised you up. But that's interesting.
But I raised you up. There is the implication that God is, at least on some level, okay with him taking power. I can see why they tend to vilify all these characters after the fact, because if you're trying to be like, see, those people are in unrest, they don't have God's favor, their leaders are being punished, so you need someone to rise up and take out the bad guy. But you can't be encouraging your own people to think that God might want them to rise up and stab you. So, you know, but they always turn evil in the end kind of narrative. You can see they're really working it.
Saleman offers
could it be referring to
$4.99
the-
and says, "Hey
Wait,
guys,
wait.
I turned 30 a few days ago. Mixed feelings about it."
Start stretching.
Yeah, dude. I was carded for cigarettes when I was 30. Quit your bitching.
I was gonna say,
The older you
welcome
get,
to
the
the
less
decade.
fucks you give. It's a good thing.
That is true.
Yeah, I wanted to say, is it possible that like raised from the dust kind of implies that he was like lowly born, like a commoner, rather than like someone from like a noble family or something?
That's how I take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, McKenzie also writes that both in 1 Samuel 2:8 and Psalms 113:7, both in poetic contexts and both refer to the elevation of the poor and needy to royalty.
Okay.
Okay, so on verse 7, Cogan writes that this shorter note on the prophecy given in verses 1 through 4 is placed in an unusual matter, quote unquote. He suggests that the point of the insertion may have been, quote, that this tradition included the extirpation of Jeroboam's line as part of Baasha's sins, in a manner similar to Hosea's denouncement of Yehu's bloody revolt against the house of Omri, as we see in Hosea 1:4 and also Kimchi, end quote. McKenzie takes...
Oh, I'm sorry. That sounds... Never mind. I'll continue. I'll talk at the end.
Okay. McKenzie takes verse 7 to be secondary and, quote, it is effectively a doublet of verses 1 through 4 in that it reiterates an indictment against Baasha, end quote. He writes, quote, its identification of Yehu as a prophet is a deduction based on the word event formula, i.e. the word of Yahweh came, in verse 1, and the tenor of Yehu's message in verses 1 through 4. Its use of the verb ka'as in the if'il does not necessarily signal DH authorship, but could be imitative. It is unlikely, then, that the verse is an earlier or independent version of the oracle. Its language and phrasing point to a different, less skillful hand than the one responsible for verses 1 through 4. It begins with vegam, as is typical of additions.
Isn't Jehu also talked about as being a prophet in Chronicles?
I guess, I've not read Chronicles yet.
Isn't mentioned anywhere else.
I thought there was a reference in Chronicles.
Wait, wasn't he the one who prophesied about the end of, was it Jeremiah's house?
Yeah,
you have to flip back several chapters, but
yeah, Cogan, sorry.
No, it's God always dictates that people should do these things, should break off from the kingdom, rebel against the king, and then of course then he has to punish them for it, so he has to get them to do something else, so he has an excuse to be pissed at them. It's just this cycle is, we're going through a couple different versions of this cycle constantly, and it's just God is a creep.
Yeah, I mean, Yehu is mentioned in Chronicles. In 2 Chronicles 20:34 states that more words of Yehu, son of Hanani, are in the book of the kings of Israel, or something like that.
Yeah.
Vortex says, Aaron, do you think promoting general education, even indirectly, is key to reducing religious dogma and fostering secular thinking?
Yes.
Although I know educated people who remain religious. Well, yeah, there's Orwell gave a thing about, who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. And so that's a lot of what we're seeing in American education now, where they want to change our history literally to say that the United States was a Christian country that our government is based on a covenant between God and Moses. In fact, one of our proposed history books actually said it in those words. So they're very much trying to control education so that they can indoctrinate rather than educate. It would have been a great thing if we had an education system that would teach kids how to think analytically, and how to be skeptical. But of course, what they want to do here in Texas is to create a generation of believers who will then be obedient minions.
It's important for people to remember that this has been a concerted, deliberate, scheming effort, and it was done by evangelical Christians. If you go all the way back to 2005 and the Jesus Camp, there was another documentary that came out around that time. It was God's Next Army. And it was about basically the next step in that grooming, where they would groom kids to send them into, at the university run by that, I think it was Faldwell's University. And they streamlined kids into positions of functional power, to be secretaries and paper carriers for senators and people in leadership, to impose this. You can look up Seven Mountains theology. They have been doing this very deliberately, and the reason is that while you can be a believer and an educated person, that faith is subtle, nuanced, and personal, not easily led, fanatical, literal. And that is what they need for people to use them and keep them just rabid and anxious and afraid, and therefore easily manipulated. And even the concepts in science will get you out of faith if you work at them. Reasonable doubt, significant figures, being able to change your mind without taking it as a personal insult. These are all skills that they can't let their children have.
Okay, I'll continue on verse 9. Elah was in Tirza at that time, getting drunk in the home of Arza. Arza. Fritz writes that the drunkenness of Elah is reported, quote, as a discriminatory fact, end quote. McKenzie writes that Elah is, quote, out of touch not only with his military, but also with his staff. His chief steward is the one getting him drunk, and is evidently involved in, perhaps even the architect of, the assassination, end quote. He compares Elah's drinking with that of Ben-Hadad in 20 verses 20 20 verses 12 and 16, which similarly leads to his defeat.
So he had someone who he trusted deliberately get him drunk, and it's also his fault for being drunk.
Yeah.
Sounds like religious reasoning. Yeah.
On verses wow, what the fuck is wrong with me? On verses 10 through 13, Sweeney comments, following the assassination of Elah, Zimri took the throne and exterminated the entire royal house in keeping with the oracle of Yehu ben Hanani. The use of the term Mashtin Bakir, he who pisses against the wall, in reference to the males of the house of Baasha/Elah, indicates the relationship between this passage and the oracles condemning Jeroboam in 1410 and Ahab in 21:21 and 2 Kings 9:8. The account of Elah's reign functions together with the account of Baasha's reign in 1533 through 1607 as a means to link the narrative complexes concerning Solomon and Jeroboam and Achab and Yehu within the larger framework of the Yehu history and the Hezekiah, Josiah, and exilic DH. The concluding assessment of Elah's reign, which notes that he followed in the sins of Jeroboam, cements the account into the DH framework. The reference to the empty gods, in Hebrew havleihem, literally their vanities, indicates that the king's emulation of the sins of Jeroboam entailed the worship of foreign gods. Verse 26 and 2 Kings 17:15. On verses 15 and 16, DeVries comments, it was in the actual 26th year of Asa that Zimri seized the throne. His tenure was brief because the army, all Israel, encamped once again at Gibbethon, compare 1527, reacted negatively when they heard of Zimri's treacherous deed. Omri, also without patronym but more famous and powerful than the Bible suggests, because the Assyrians subsequently referred to Israel as Bit Humri, House of Omri, is Zimri's commanding officer, general of the army, over against commander of half of the chariotry, and may for this reason have taken special offense to what Zimri had done, because of the unusual that day, quote-unquote, by Yom Hahu, in verse 16. This writer, i.e. DeVries, has argued that Omri's coronation amounted to acclamation by the sacral union, authorizing him to strike Zimri down as an act of loyalty and charismatic entitlement. On verse 18, he set the palace on fire around him. Although Kimchi wrote that Omri burned the palace, early translations, Josephus in Antiquities 8:311, and modern commentators wrote that Zimri burned himself. Cogan notes a similar story regarding the supposed last Assyrian king Sin Shar Ishkun, i.e. Sardanapalus, who, quote, seeing that Nineveh was about to fall to the barbarians, threw himself into the fire of his burning palace, end quote. It's not an end quote. A portrayal likely derived from the fiery demise of Shamash Shum Ukin in Babylon in 648 BCE. End quote.
That is Sweeney badass way to go out. I'm sorry, but like, screw you all. I'm burning down the entire palace with me in it. Like, that's it to be remembered for going out that way. That's pretty epic.
I think it's also used in I don't know if it's a trope, but I think it's used in like later fiction as well. I think there's like a Game of Thrones scene that's similar. I can't remember now.
I mean, people get burned, but that's because dragons.
Yeah.
Oh, you're thinking of the brothers fighting and falling into the fire together. The mountain and the
Yeah. That's it. Those two. Yeah. The city is burning around them, and then they fight each other, and then they both die or something. I don't remember. It got stupid at the end. What can I say?
Okay, I'll continue. Sweeney writes that the portrayal of Zimri's suicide, quote, indicates that he did not anticipate such a rapid military response, end quote. Fritz, however, writes that it is unclear if he did set himself on fire, and writes, quote, the evil act is probably attributed to the evil enemy, end quote.
I just one thing I wanted to mention about Zimri before we move on. We didn't mention that at all, right? Zimri has the same name as the bad guy in a much earlier story, which story probably written later, but still, I was wondering is there a connection because it's like bad guy's name, let's call another bad guy by the same name, sort of thing. Oh, you're muted, Lilith.
Sorry, I was just going to say, or maybe it was just that they'd always been telling stories of, this bad guy, and he sort of recurs like an 80s cartoon villain. But in fairness, I mean, if it's another kingdom's leader, they certainly, have...
No, I'm talking about, the story with
Zimri,
in the desert. Yeah, the one who gets pierced with the...
Is this the one where the man
in Phineas stabs them?
Oh, son of Salu, I guess.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Numbers 25.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Numbers, yeah. It's called Zimri, son of Salu?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like he's killed. He's like kind of represents the rebellion.
Distinct enough. It could be either a sort of a calling someone a Scrooge. All has that association with it, or just a coincidence. I mean, they're very different types of stories.
Right, I'm wondering if this Zimri from our story, if he's like the original rebellious guy who dies soon after this rebellion starts, if maybe, the character in that story is also kind of a rebel that gets killed very quickly.
You're wondering if there's literary
maybe.
symbolism.
I personally doubt it, but I don't see any comments from commentators regarding the connection.
Right.
So I personally.
Yeah, I mean the stories aren't similar enough, so it's just
Yeah.
because they have the same name and they're both bad doesn't mean anything. I mean, one way you could argue is like if everyone knew that there was a character called Zimri, who was bad in history, why would you call your child by the same name? And then the likelihood of some Israelite didn't know that Zimri is a bad name to give your child, that Zimri ends up becoming this major evil character or whatever. That seems very unlikely to me. Well, obviously, I guess the easy explanation is that story came after, so there wouldn't.
I think it's just a coincidence. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, in Hispanic America, we have many people named Jesus.
True.
Well, I know that there are Israelis called Nimrod.
Really?
Yeah, I mean there is a name Nimrod in the Bible, so obviously.
Yeah, but he's not exactly.
He is described as a mighty one in Chronicles,
a mighty warrior.
In Genesis. Yeah.
Mighty hunter.
I won't get. Yeah. Okay, so on verse 21, Tibni son of Ginath. We have no other information regarding him. Septuagint and Josephus in Antiquities 8:311 pronounce his name as Thamanai. McKenzie notes that the name Tivni means man of straw and perhaps associated with the Phoenician Tabnat, but its application remains uncertain. He notes that some suggest that the name might indicate a frail child, or a nickname, or a short form of a longer name no longer preserved. Cogan notes that some, like Gray and Yavin, take Ginath to be derived from the place name Gina, probably Beth Hagan of 2 Kings 9:27, in the territory of Manasseh. Sweeney suggested that Tibni was a supporter of Zimri, but also an opportunist who attempted to capitalize on Israel's instability. And finally, on 22, Tibni died. We don't know the circumstances of his death. Josephus, in Antiquities 8:311, wrote that Omri's supporters killed Tibni. Rashi and Kara, based on Seder Olam Rabbah 17, wrote that when Asa married Omri's daughter for Jehoshaphat, they killed Tibni when they saw Omri's prominence. Kimchi and Abravanel, however, wrote that Tibni died naturally. Septuagint and the Lucenic... Sorry,
I think you misread that. It's Asa took one of Omri's daughter for his son, Jehoshaphat.
For Jehoshaphat, yeah.
Oh, I thought you said that the daughter's name was Jehoshaphat. That he married his daughter.
Married Omri's daughter for Jehoshaphat.
Yeah, for Jehoshaphat, his son. Yeah.
Yeah, I said that.
Okay.
Okay, so the Septuagint and the Lucenic Recension add that Yoram, his brother, has also died. This reading is favored by Cogan and McKenzie, with the latter noting Burney's opinion, quote, "The genuineness of this text is favored by the fact that the additional words supply a detail unessential to the narrative, and thus not to be explained as a later invention," end quote. This reading might suggest that both Tibni and Yoram were killed by Omri.
Yeah, it's interesting how Tivni died. Doesn't say how he died or anything. It seems like, his side won and he died. Like, it could mean that his own people killed him. It could mean he died in battle.
But his generals still won. It doesn't have the nice narrative. Clearly, there was nothing in this story that they wanted to use for political ends, because they don't have any problem when it's a story that's going to fit into whatever overarching narrative they're trying to portray, being like, and then he was dying on the battlefield, and a stranger came up to him and said, "Oh no, are you okay?" No, and he fell on his sword, and narratives and exchanges. They don't mind filling it out where it's important to whatever their political goals were in this moment. Clearly, they didn't really care that much.
They didn't want to give Omri the win.
No, they didn't want to give Omri the win. That's exactly it. That's the only importance of this character. Don't give him the win.
Yeah, it doesn't matter as much as how things went down, but that they went down and like what happened because these kings were evil, because they were, idolatrous.
Because they were fighting with each other and yada, yada, yada. And no, I'm sorry. I forgot. That's a good thing. You're supposed to kill people, but only when God wants you to. But he's not going to directly tell you. And then you'll kill the wrong person and he'll kill you. And it won't be his fault. None of it is his fault. Yay.
All right. Should I continue?
Yeah, please.
Oh, okay. Verse 23. In the 31st year of King Asa of Judah, Omri became king over Israel for 12 years. He reigned in Tirzah 6 years. Then he bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver. He built on the hill and named the town that he built Samaria, or Shomron, after Shemer, the owner of the hill. Omri did what was displeasing to God. He was worse than all who preceded him. He followed all the ways of Yerovam, son of Nebat, and the sins that he committed and caused Israel to commit, provoking the anger of the Eternal, the God of Israel, with their futilities. The other events of Omri's reign, his actions, and the exploits he performed are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. Omri rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria, and his son Ahab, succeeded him as king. Ahab, son of Omri, became king over Israel in the 38th year of King Asa of Judah, and Ahab, son of Omri, reigned over Israel in Samaria for 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did what was displeasing to God more than all who preceded him. Not content to follow the sins of Yerovam, son of Nebat, he took as wife Jezebel, or Jezebel, daughter of King Etbaal of the Phoenicians, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar to Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made a sacred post. Ahab did more to provoke the anger of the Eternal, the God of Israel, than all the kings of Israel who preceded him. During his reign, Hiel, the Bethelite, fortified Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of Aviram, his firstborn, and set its gates in place at the cost of Segub, his youngest, in accordance with the word that God had spoken through Joshua, son of Nun.
Yeah, and this move of to Samaria being the new capital for Israel, we do also see a lot of archaeological evidence for that move. We see a lot of new fortifications in this time period, and we also find it to be a hub of
commerce.
Commerce. Yeah, that's the word.
In a prominent temple.
There's
right. The temple.
We find like goods and stuff that were created in other parts of the world. So like it shows that they were importing stuff as well. So it's a sign that like Omri's kingdom at this point at least was definitely more powerful than Judah and had far-reaching influence.
Yeah, they were definitely, the North was wealthier. They had trade. They had frankly just a more sophisticated and civilized way of life. And Judah was sort of the backwoods area that was, kind of very country and not in a complimentary kind of way. And so they're very insecure. And all of these kings that did evil and were so horrible, by that they mean we don't like them, and so we're going to crap on them. It doesn't mean they weren't actually very good at what they did. I mean, obviously, Omri and Ahab, they bring in all this trade, international relations, start making, marriages to obviously intelligent, educated, motivated women from nearby countries. So they're probably very good kings. Evil in the sight of the Lord just means my priests 3 generations later are pissed off at you.
It does seem like the main issue is a theological issue, right? It's that they're partaking the worship of other gods, and that's the evil.
Yeah, no, it is. But again, this is all retconning. At the time, there would have been no reasonable expectation that they would have been exclusively worshiping the henotheistic God of the south. At this time, you've got El Elyon in the north as sort of the main god, and Yahweh in the south of Judah. This is more defined at this moment in history. And they are different gods, and everyone worshiped multiple gods. It's only your Josiah, indoctrinating priests of the Deuteronomists that are trying to completely push this narrative that we all should have been worshiping only my God and no other God. Yahweh was worshipped along with many other gods. They were polytheistic. The people on the street at the time this is writing about would have been worshiping all kinds of gods, and that would have been totally normal.
It's blatantly theocratic. What's the word?
Theocentric?
Theocratic is a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Because it keeps mentioning, if you actually want to read about what these kings did, go read the annals of the kings of Israel. This text is all about how bad they were. And this is all about why we don't like these people. We're gonna just pick and choose from the annals the bits that we think are relevant to our theocracy. In the south.
Theocracy.
And it's very obvious that's what they're doing. Otherwise, why would there be 2 different books, right? Why would we have this list of this is what happened, this is what happened, this was the next king, this was the next king, but we're only going to focus on the bad things that they did, or if they were good or bad. We're not going to focus on any of the other interesting things. That'll be in another book.
It's a theocratic narrative.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention is I found it interesting that it omits all of the kings up to Baasha. It says, or the kings of Israel, it says, and they fought with whatever the king of Israel, the king of Judah was at the time, all the days of his reign, or something like that. And we have that with Baasha. Baasha fought with Asa all the days of his reign. And then from then, but after that, it doesn't mention that they fought with each other. And I'm not sure what the reason is, but I wonder if it's something to do with the fact that, Omri and Ahab were quite powerful, and if they wanted to fight with the Judah kings, they would have just destroyed them. And so it wouldn't have maybe the scribes at the time were maybe they left them alone,
But they probably did all of whatever was necessary at the time to maintain civil relations, and then narrators much later are just ignoring all that because it doesn't suit their narrative.
Yeah, they don't want to write. Okay, King Baasha fought with Asa, and then it's when it comes to Omri, it's King Asa paid tribute to Omri.
Well, I'll get into the details of this later, look closer to the time. But you have the same thing with Hezekiah. They have this whole narrative about how God magically won this battle for them at Jerusalem. When what actually happened, if you look at, outside historical sources, is that he rebelled against the person he was supposed to be paying tribute to. Guy came, took out everyone around him, and he begged and pleaded and groveled and paid him off. And that's what happened. But they invent this whole magical narrative, angel vengeance story to try and make it look good, when really he was just a crying baby throwing gold and daughters at them to make them go away.
Should we start the commentary and then... Should we start the commentary and then when Aaron comes back, then go back to the comments from the chat?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So on verse 23, Omri. The etymology of his name is uncertain. Cogan notes that some have considered Omri to be of Canaanite extraction, according to Gray, or a foreign mercenary, according to Montgomery and Geman and Noth. Others assigned him with Issachar, based on Ahab's royal hall in Jezreel, according to Shanda and Benjamin Mazal. McKenzie writes that Omri, quote, was arguably the most important king in Israel's history, end quote, and writes, quote, his significance is indicated by archaeological evidence of extensive building activity on large public structures, especially in Samaria, Jezreel, Megiddo, and Chatzor. It is further attested by references to Omri and his dynasty in contemporary ancient Near Eastern texts. Israel comes to be known as the House of Omri in Neo-Assyrian inscriptions until the end of its existence as a kingdom. Additionally, according to the Mesha Stela, Omri subjugated Moab. He, or Achab, also appears to have made a vassal of Judah. They also took back territory previously lost to Aram Damascus before joining Aram in opposition to the Assyrians. His reign, together with Achab's, marked the zenith of the Kingdom of Israel. On verse 24, the exact reasoning of Omri's purchase of Samaria is unclear. Sweeney writes that Omri's purchase indicates an interest in establishing a capital for the Omride dynasty on much the same basis as Jerusalem. He writes, quote, although Samaria was located in the territory of Manasseh, Omri would not be dependent on the northern tribes, giving him greater flexibility and power in ruling over the northern coalition, end quote. Fritz writes that Samaria, quote, not only had the advantage that one was not forced during the planning to take existing structures into account, but also made Omri the local king over the city, so that he could exercise absolute power without consideration for the structures of the local community, end quote. DeVries, however, notes that Samaria, quote, can hardly be praised too much, end quote, as a strategic location, since, quote, it stands entirely alone with rich fields on every side. It can be reached directly from Shechem on the east, but looks out over the western North Manassite hills toward the coastal highway, end quote. He takes verse 24 to be in written form as D.H. received it, but it evidently reproduces a popular oral tradition. He further writes, quote, since a new capital city would hardly be named after a previous owner, we would agree with Gray and Noth that the ascription to Shemer is imaginative folk etymology, although Gray may be right in pointing to the plural Adonai, Lord, as evidence that Shemer was a clan or tribe. The actual name of the site was Mount Shomron, and hence Omri called his city Shomron in Greek Samaria. That he paid money for it, the amount may be legendary, and built it, suggests that it had not been previously occupied. Although some traces of early bronze occupation have been found, the Harvard expeditions of 1924 and following years has confirmed that Omri's city was indeed the first on this site.
If there was some water source or something there might have been, small local something or others there, but this was clearly the first city, like proper city. So that's cool. That is really cool. Yeah, Omri's so evil, building a, giant city and metropolis and bringing in trade. Bastard.
Okay, on 29, Achab. He appears in extra-biblical sources. Cogan notes that an inscription of Shalmaneser III of Assyria reports of the participation of Achab the Israelite, Achabu Siriliah, in an alliance between Syria and Phoenicia, who stopped Shalmaneser's advancement at Kalkul. And McKenzie comments, historically, Achab was a powerful king whose reign, along with that of his father, represented the high point of Israel's power and international prestige. The two brought stability and prosperity to their kingdom. In contrast to his depiction in Kings, he was a worshipper of Yahweh. His maintenance of the royal shrines at Dan and Bethel and the names of his children attest as much. His construction of a temple or altar to Baal may have represented an accommodation for his wife, but did not signal a change in his own religious stance or practice. Other accoutrements, such as the Asherah, were not innovations and would have been accepted at the time as appropriate features in the worship of Yahweh. But the post-DH interpolator, for the post-DH interpolator, these activities were provocations that further distanced Israel from Yahweh and would eventually lead to its demise. On verse 31, he also married Jezebel. Hebrew for Jezebel is Izevel. The exact meaning of this name is unclear. The word Zevel is sometimes taken from the root Zain Bet Lamed, to be honored or exalted, according to Cogan and Sweeney, or prince, according to DeVries, with the meaning prince. Zebul was also one of Baal's names. If we take E to be an interrogative, her name might mean, where is my honor or exaltation, or where is my prince, though E might be a shortened form of Avi, meaning the god. The correct, quote-unquote, pronunciation of the name is Izevul, but the Masoretes changed it to Izevel, meaning no dung. Sweeney writes that her name is a polemical parody of a fuller name that was designed to honor the Phoenician gods Baal and Asherah. Regarding the marriage, several commentators consider the marriage to be historical. For example, Fritz writes that the marriage, quote, cannot be doubted since such family unions generally served to enforce and secure already existing political relations. Likewise, Sweeney writes that the marriage makes perfect sense, quote-unquote, from a political and economic standpoint. While McKenzie writes that the marriage, quote, would have sealed a treaty between Israel and the Phoenicians that would have been of mutual interest for its trade benefits, end quote, he writes that there are reasons to doubt the historical validity of verses 31 through 33, as we'll see later. Josephus, in Antiquities 8318, wrote that Jezebel was, quote, an energetic and bold little woman, end quote, but also that she, quote, plunged into great licentiousness and madness, end quote.
Oh, yeah. If there is one thing about the author of this book, it is that they fucking hated Jezebel. Once women have their own names and start doing things, then they're getting all uppity and God hates them. And it's mutual. But like, seriously.
She has a pretty wicked death scene too.
She does. But again, it's all very set up. And like, this woman clearly, when you look at the actual quality of what she does, it's all perfectly reasonable. You've got one insane, dirty, homeless guy going around killing people in the name of his desert visions. You jail that guy. You jail that guy immediately.
I got some comments to read. Sable Eagle says, may I run a 3/4 formed idea past you, please?
No.
Any Bible story that never happened as a parable to teach how to be good, good being in line with nature of God and pretty much all Bible. Anybody on this panel agree with that?
That is a theological position for somewhat more educated.
I think there's a bit more.
Areas.
The next one is...
The Sable Eagle continues. Pretty much all Bible stories never happened, so whole Bible must be meant as a guide to the nature of the supernatural being that dabbles in earthly affairs. Sable Eagle continues. Said supernatural meddler is apparently into betrayal, industrial scale murder, deception, stealing of land and inheritance, taking of little girls as breeding stock and sex toys, etc. Therefore, this book isn't a guide to how to live, it's a warning.
Yeah.
Well, Eagle continues. It's a warning that there's a powerful, evil, malicious being that wants to set people against each other, mess people around, stiff people out of owed payments, and tear families apart, turn girls into... Whoops, and then we didn't get the final statement of that.
No, it continues.
Not for me, it doesn't. Because I'm looking at where Peter saved it.
Yeah, that was the last one, I think.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I
Doesn't
think
look
you've-
like it. It doesn't look like it should have stopped there. I like the summation. I wish that I had written that. I would like to put all that together and make it into a video. That was nicely phrased.
I mean, there is one that says that, or 73 million Americans voted for backstabbing, narcissistic, child molesting, thieving, lying, genocidal, fascist, fuckwit without supernatural intervention affecting their minds. So I don't know if that's the end of that.
Yeah, I was wondering about
honestly, the idea that the followers of a particularly literal-minded, simplistic version of this god voted for the narcissistic rapist sociopath who lies to them constantly and insults them. That very much lines a bit. That's a lateral move from most evangelicals. This one is more orange than their last one.
Apparently there was a message in between those two, but he says that the next part got evaporated by the algorithm. There are things you can't say.
Okay. You know what? Email your entire original comment to Peter at Gonna Go For It, and that we're gonna, I'm sure Aaron then at least will have it in if he wants to summarize you in a bit of content, because I'd like to hear him say that when Aaron rattles out a really good line. It's like
Thank you. And then Tammy B says, awesome content, Aaron. Your show kick arse. Thank you very much.
It's a good thing she spelled it arse and not ass, because
and signed with a black heart. That was nice too.
YouTube hates.
Oh, Aaron's not even here. Okay.
Are we ready then?
No, I have more. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have like 4 more pages on this. I don't know. I'm sorry. Because it's important. It's important, I guess. I mean, these are dense, especially like the last verse 34, which I have like a 2-page comment. Oh God, I'm such a nerd. Okay, so on verse. Still on verse 31, Ethbal, king of the Sidonians. Commentators generally date his reign to 887 through 856 BCE, based on the work of H. Jacob Katzenstein. Although Ethbal is usually identified with Itobal, mentioned in the Ahiram inscription, McKenzie writes that, quote, it is something of a stretch to make the dates work, end quote. Noting that Ahiram's dating circa 1000 BCE would put his son and successor, Itobal, too early to overlap with Achab in the mid-9th century. The only extra biblical source to mention Ethbal is Josephus, who cites Menander of Ephesus in Antiquities 8324, who describes Itobal as ruling over the Tyrians. Tyrians? How do you say this? Tyrians or Tyrians? Never mind.
I think English speakers pronounce it Tyrians, but
Tyrians.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In
but
against
the city is pronounced Tyre.
Yeah. Tyrian. In Against Appian 1:1-3, he's described as the priest of Astarte. McKenzie, however, writes that Josephus's account is a third-hand witness at best. He further writes, quote, there is a second Itobal mentioned in the 8th century Assyrian inscription, known as the Iran inscription, by the name Tubalu, and a third Itobal in the 6th century, Josephus Antiquities 10:228 and Against Appian 1:156. The latter will help to account for the title King of the Sidonians, which is well attested in the Babylonian and Persian periods, but curious earlier. It would also fit well with my dating of the prophetic narrator, who might have been attracted to the Hebrew rendition of the name for its ostensible meaning with Baal. My name meaning Mackenzie's dating, not mine.
Yeah.
Okay, on 32, Fritz comments, the excavations in Samaria have not yet produced a temple of Baal. One can assume that this temple stood inside the palace district, but the buildings in this area are badly preserved due to later destruction. After El, the father of the gods, Baal was the most powerful god of the Canaanite pantheon. The Ugaritic myth describes his takeover and exercise of power in a special cycle. During the second millennium, Baal was equated with the weather god Hadad, and at the same time regarded as the lord of vegetation and fertility. Thus, he was seen as the lord of life as such. Both aspects demonstrate his universal claim to rule over the earth. He was therefore an immediate rival for Yahweh. This explains the harsh polemics against this god during the period of the monarchy.
It's amazing because Baal, being a god of fertility and the soil and the god of life, is literally creating life, feeding the people, whereas Yahweh is a war god and thus a god of death. And the fact that, at least from a narrative historical point of view, Yahweh won that battle and managed to, make Baal an evil thing for so many centuries, it's proof that good doesn't always win, and you really need to fight.
And after all, the North, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but at least in antiquity, I think I've read enough that the North partook of the better agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
the better fields. So therefore, like, why not worship this Baal that seems to be responsible for bringing
Doing
about
them
all this
good,
blessing, right? Like, they're entitled to do this.
It's like worshiping cats. Most sensible thing we ever did. Seriously. They eat rats that spread disease and eat your food. This is win-win-win. It's the most logical god we ever came up with.
Okay, so Hiel on verse 34, Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. The note in verse 34 is in violation of the curse that Joshua put upon Jericho. Quote, cursed of the Lord be the man who shall undertake to fortify this city of Jericho. And I didn't bring a citation, and I don't know why. It's Joshua 6:26. Sweeney writes that the mention of Jericho points to a reversal of Israel's control of land acquired with Joshua's conquest, and points forward to the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem and capture of King Zedekiah at Jericho, 2 Kings 25, 1-7. DeVries writes that DH copied the notice in Joshua to suggest that the wickedness introduced by Achab encouraged a certain man to violate the curse. Cogan, however, writes that the verse breaks the connection between Achab's idolatry in verses 32 through 34 and between Elijah's appearance in verse 17:1, which suggests that this tradition was added post-DH. Another sign of its lateness is its absence from the Lusanic recension. Peshitta has Achab building Jericho, and Targum has Hiel from Beth Mume.
It seems like the bit about, the fate of these people and sort of the curse back in Joshua about Jericho would have been written or inserted into the text about the same time, or came from a mutual source material.
I mean, one of the obvious questions that Rashi sees in this this little piece here, right, is traditionally Jericho would have been a Judahite city. Oh no, well, within the realm of the Judahites as opposed to Israelites. So why?
Yeah, it is within the area of the conquest, according to any of the varying maps that are supposed to be the promised land. It should be within that range.
Yeah. So according to Rashi, the reason why it doesn't say in the days of Asa, it says in the days of Ahab, is because this evil story, this Hiel, he did something bad. Because he's a bad guy, you should mention him together with the other bad guy. And
he's one of those nitty northerners and knows what he's doing.
Well, he says it because a curse is related to a corrupt person. Alternatively, even though Ahab witnessed divine retribution visited upon Hiel, Ahab nevertheless did not repent. So it's inserted here because Ahab witnessed what happened during his reign. Like, oh, here it comes Hiel. Both his sons died during the construction of just like Yahweh said it would happen through Joshua, and then he continued.
Does anyone else think of the uncle who gets drunk and says, I always knew this was going to happen, despite the fact that he predicted exactly the opposite to happen, but he can't remember it?
Yeah.
That's what God sounds like.
And
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
you
I
have
mean,
this
and yeah, and then the
collective-
next chapter he's going to have another thing about why does the story of Elijah come after this part. We'll get to that.
Okay. My final comment, which is a page, almost 2 pages, is at the cost of his firstborn son Abiram, at the cost of his youngest son Segub. Joshua 6:26 reads, "He shall lay its foundations at the cost of his firstborn, and set up its gate at the cost of his youngest." Commentators generally offer 2 interpretations. One, their deaths are the result of Joshua's curse. This interpretation is shared by traditionals and several modern commentators, like Fritz and Sweeney. Cogan notes that some, like Gray and Hirsi, suggested that his sons died due to the contaminated waters of the Jericho oasis, or, quoting Skinner, quote, that some tragic fate actually overtook Hiel's sons, and that the common opinion recognized in this is the operation of the ancient curse pronounced by Joshua, end quote. And 2, Hiel sacrificed his sons. This interpretation is attested in Targum, quote, he killed Abiram his firstborn and Segub his younger, end quote. DeVries writes, quote, the foundation sacrifice, revealed by modern archaeology, is probably what was involved. The children named were probably infants, dead or alive, placed in jars and inserted into the masonry, propitiating the gods and warding off evil. End quote. Yeah, please correct me, Isaac.
Yeah, I'm going to need some clarification on what I just heard.
Propitiating, yes. I'll read this again. The foundation sacrifice, revealed by modern archaeology, is probably what was involved. The children named were probably infants, dead or alive, placed in jars and inserted into the masonry, propitiating the gods and warding off evil.
They thought it would prevent the building from falling over due to an earthquake. Propitiate. Yeah, it's I don't know, but they used to bury babies in the foundations of buildings to preserve them from earthquakes. And I can only hope, due to the high infant mortality, that these are babies that were already dead, because that happened.
This is the first time hearing of this.
Yeah, I mean, I have
before.
Yeah, I have more.
I mentioned it before, no?
There are variations of it in many cultures, but this is I think, the first time it's specifically mentioned in this.
Yeah, I have more. It's still a page and a half. So, the sacrifice interpretation, however, is rejected by several scholars. Fritz writes that the verse, quote, cannot be used as proof for child sacrifice connected to building projects, end quote. McKenzie writes that the practice presumed to lie behind this verse is of questionable attestation in Mesopotamia. He writes, quote, it is possible that the author of the verse meant to defame Hiel by accusing him of child sacrifice, but the cryptic nature of the notice makes that unlikely. The vagueness of the accusation could foster the insinuation of child sacrifice on Hiel's part, which the author probably would not mind. Hence, while the possibility that Hiel's sons were sacrificial victims cannot be ruled out conclusively, it must be considered unlikely. The better understanding of the notice is that Hiel's sons died in the course of the construction, and that their deaths, which normally would have been regarded as routine, considering the high rate of infant mortality, received special notice because of the curse attributed to Joshua. End quote.
It would have seemed like a curse if they died specifically in accidents at their father's construction, though. That would have been considered very unlucky. Which I'm just saying, construction accidents happen nowadays, and we have, cranes and hard helmets.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been both. They couldn't have both been infants, I guess. Right?
No.
If it's his oldest and his firstborn and his youngest.
It would take a long time to build, though.
Oh, yes, true.
Think about, think about how long it took to build the Gothic cathedrals.
Right, yeah.
And just to be extra sure, I've turned to Heath Durrell in Child Sacrifice in Ancient Israel, pages 116 through 117. He writes that while previous generations of scholars like Trumbull, Cook, Gray, and May suggested that Hiel's children were offered as foundation sacrifices, with archaeological evidence offered to support this interpretation, i.e. the presence of infants buried under the floors of houses, he writes that the problem with this interpretation is that, quote, these infant burials need not be need not be interpreted as sacrifices, and the only textual evidence offered in support of interpreting them as such was the notice concerning Chiel. End quote. He writes that the existence of a custom in which children were offered as foundation sacrifices is debatable, quote unquote. He writes, quote, even if one could demonstrate that children were offered as foundation sacrifices in the ancient Near East in general, and in ancient Israel in particular, however, the context of the biblical notice makes more sense if one understands the death of Chiel's sons as non-sacrificial. After all, if Chiel had sacrificed his children during the reestablishment of Jericho, then their deaths would have been an intentional choice. What would be the nature of the curse if he offered his children willingly? If the death of Chiel's sons was something that he did not anticipate, but that came about as an unintentional result of, or as divine punishment for, his rebuilding the city, on the other hand, then the curse oracle and its fulfillment notice make much more sense. End quote.
That does.
He concludes that it is... Sorry, please.
No, I was You can finish.
He concludes that it is more likely that the mention of Chiel's children, quote, is simply a recounting of their deaths, which occurred as a consequence of and as retribution of violating Joshua's prohibition against rebuilding the city, end quote.
What is the archaeological record of Jericho? We understand it wasn't inhabited at the time of Joshua's conquest. It was inhabited for like thousands of years before, and then it was rebuilt. But was it rebuilt around the time of King Ahab, or is it much later?
It's possible that the rebuilding of like a walled city is more what they're talking about than merely having people there. I mean, you know, the grain bins of Jericho are 12,000 years old, but that doesn't mean that there was a entire walled city at that point. Yeah, it also occurred to me that if they were infant sacrifices of any kind, including a foundational one, they probably wouldn't have names. Given the rate of infant mortality, babies were not named initially, nor were they necessarily given full burial rights, which might account for why you have these, you know, jars at the base of a house thing going on. Because there was a lot of death. There were no vaccines. There was no penicillin. A lot of babies died.
Yeah, it does make sense that this is talking about like a curse, right? His maybe adult sons or whatever.
At least old enough to be notable
to have names,
individuals,
right?
Names
that died mystically around the time of this part of the building and this part of the building, and it matches exactly what Joshua said. Blah blah blah. You know, neither of these stories are probably, you know, Joshua and this story are probably completely, you know, inserted just to make a theological point. But as far as I understood about the whole thing is that Jericho was not inhabited at the time of Joshua, and Joshua never destroyed Jericho. But Jericho did have a history of being a walled city. Its walls were destroyed probably by earthquake a long time before the conquest narrative. And then it was repopulated later on.
Yeah, wasn't there several layers of Jericho's wall that had been in, you know, in battles, because there was obviously a lot of battles going on right now. The records show everyone's
I'm just
attacking.
wondering if this was the actual time when it was built, but it wasn't Joshua who destroyed it.
Lawrence, do you have any input on that?
Not off the top of my head.
Atheist Carpenter has a comment that if the babies had already died, then where's the sacrifice?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not burying them with the family might have been seen as like sacrificial. You know,
you could also like
them in a building,
bury them in a way that, I don't know, dedicated them to a god or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dedication.
And you said that they wouldn't have been named, and I'm sure they would all be named Brick.
And in a strong
cement
sense,
would have been better.
In a strong sense, is a post hoc rationalization of what happened. That's very bad, but somehow we have to justify it because we keep on insisting that God is good and He is in control.
Yeah, He's in control. All right. It very much gives off, like, it makes me understand every time we go back to this kind of reasoning why John Calvin came up with the theology he did, because it's evil as fuck, but it's one of the less rationally incoherent versions, because God just deliberately makes people evil and then tortures them for it, and this is what justice is because I said so.
Mhm.
Incredibly fucked, but it maintains a certain level of intellectual consistency.
Say 10616 says, we in Romania have a story where a woman was put into the wall of a monastery so that it wouldn't collapse. The story portrays the killing of that woman in a good light.
This is my surprised face.
Yeah.
That might have been based on like a real, like they might have like found inside the wall a body, and then they built a story around it.
Wow.
There's another one.
Well, yeah, but that was from Mark
Yeah,
announcing
Oh,
that he
okay,
has
sorry.
early today. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, so like, Hale's all giving up his sons for put them in the jar. He's like, here's my firstborn, Brick, and my second son, Mortar.
We're all going to hell.
yeah.
Okay. VIP tickets to hell for everyone.
All right. Well, Mark, thank you for being on. We'll go ahead and we'll see you next week. I'm going to go ahead and read 17. Are we ready for that now?
Yeah, I have no major questions on this chapter. So
Bye.
There are no
Right,
there are no Christians who managed to decide that Asa was Jesus in some way or something.
No, there are only 3, and I mean not really 3, but like they didn't really were interesting
so much.
Like there wasn't a lot about Jesus. It's like preach stuff.
Yeah, preachy.
We've had it all before.
But in chapter 17 we will have so.
Yeah.
Yes, we finally get into Elijah, who's not creepy and gross at all.
and absolutely not hairy. Oh wait, that's the other guy.
That's Elisha.
But he is described as hairy.
I think Elijah is described as hairy.
Kings.
Sorry.
Yeah.
He's an asshole.
All right. Let me read now. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. Ain't he special? The word of the Lord came up to him, saying, go from here and turn eastward, and hide yourself by the Wadi Sharith, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the wadi, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So he went and did according to the word of God. He went and lived by the Wadi Sharith, which is east of Jordan. What?
Kerith.
Yeah.
Who's reading?
Yeah, English is dumb. I'm helping you out, Aaron. When I offer you help, you should take it. What would you do when you get to Chronicles?
Okay, so this is.
I mean, there are like English.
I think Aaron's gonna cry when we get to Chronicles.
Yeah,
there are English pronunciations of like names, like for example Ahab rather than Ahav, but like Kerith and like that's probably how it would have been pronounced, and then at some point English was like no, ch is ch, and then they just kind of changed some but not all of the word times that ch is pronounced k.
Yeah.
Okay, so
sometimes they have both, like
Wadi
Kerith.
Like arch and arc.
Yeah.
Okay, Wadi Kerith, which is east of the Gordon. Sorry.
You're going to hell, Aaron.
The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the wadi. But after a while, the wadi dried up. No more wadi. We're all out of wadi. But after a while, the wadi dried up because there was no rain in the land. When the word of the Lord came to him, saying, now go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there, for I have commanded a widow to feed you. So he set out and went to Zarephath. And he came to the gate of the town. When he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, "Bring me a little water in a vessel so that I may drink." As she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, "Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." But she said, "As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple of sticks that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." They're going to eat sticks and die? Okay, I'm sorry. Elijah said to her, "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said, but first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me, and afterward make something for yourself and your son." This boy doesn't listen. "For thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth." She went and did as Elijah said, so that she as well as her and her household ate for many days. The jar of meal was not emptied, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. How far did you want me to go, Tomer?
Finish the chapter.
Okay. After this, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became ill. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. She then said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son?" But he said to her, "Give me your son." And she took him in her bosom, carried him up to the upper chamber where he was lodging, and laid him on his own bed. He cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought calamity upon the widow with whom I was staying by killing her son?" Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again." The Lord listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came into him again, and he revived. Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper chamber to the house and gave him to his mother. And Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." That'll be 3950. So the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth." And
So,
if you believe that story.
Few interesting things about this. So first of all, yeah, this is the start of the Elisha cycle. So these are the 2 main prophets. Oh, what are you so mad
No,
about?
the thing is that I know that people will confuse between Elijah, which in Hebrew it's Eliyahu, and
Okay.
Elisha, which is Elisha. So I can only blame English for this. Fuck English. It's Eliyahu, not Elijah.
Looks like Elijah to me, buddy.
What was that?
Use
Eliyahu?
RJ.
Elia-
If we use
Eliyahu,
Elijah,
yeah.
if we use Elijah, that will be distinct enough for me. Elisha.
Just say Elisha.
A lot of times, a lot of the names in the Bible that end in Yahu, for some reason, were shortened to Yah in the Greek. So Eliah and then Elijah. But
Well, they were.
say
Well, the thing
Elisha,
is,
not Elisha?
Yah itself was also like Yahoo, Yah. They were both.
The Hebrew
names
also
for God.
names that end in Yah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it was like the Greeks were like, Yahoo, Yah. As everyone will have Yah at the end.
Use the Jaman.
Like Benaiah is Benayahu in the Hebrew.
So, so you might have already noticed a few parallels between Elijah and Jesus. That's for a very good reason. When they were writing the Jesus narratives, they wanted Jesus to, portray everything that a good prophet should have. In many ways, Jesus would resemble Moses, Joshua, Elijah, Elisha.
I thought that these resemblances were with Benny Hinn.
No. So there are a couple things, right? So you might notice when it comes to this drought, right? If you remember the story of Ruth, when did they came into the land when there was a
Famine.
a famine. Yeah, that's right. And similarly, he is well, I guess in a little different way. We have a what's it called? A story where people are moving to another place
Exodus.
while there was a
Migration?
famine. Yeah, migration. Thank you. God, I don't
Or
even know why I didn't
refugees,
fucking
I guess
remember
in
that
this
word.
case. It's okay.
Yeah, migration happening while there is a famine, or in this case a drought, but still. And of course the making sure that there is more what is it? Yeah, the jar of meal will not be emptied and the jug of oil will not fail. So it's very much like the feeding of the 5,000. It's just kind of course ramped up
Where the
in
baskets never empty. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So it's this would have been like the thing.
No, I remember the cask of Everfull fluids from Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah, it's exactly like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
All of my characters for some reason always had that, but just had alcohol.
God is a terrible DM.
And then the same thing with the reviving of the widow's son, because so it doesn't exactly say that he was dead. Now it does say that there was no breath left in him.
Well.
And hold on, let me finish my
Yeah.
sentence, Tomer. And then it said that the breath of life went back into him, so we can presume that he was dead.
Yeah.
Mouth to
so-
mouth. But well, and Jesus also, the widow of
Widow's son,
Nain.
yeah.
Yeah, her son was revived. Although it isn't given as much backstory and connection between the characters, because of course they're trying to copycat all the prophets into Jesus' story. Or they're all prefigurations and it's magic, because magic.
Yeah.
To be fair, the people at the time probably thought if someone wasn't breathing, if they didn't have any breath in them, they were dead. Like,
I'm just surprised that
breath
there
was their
prequel to
divine
Jesus.
life.
Who would have suspected such a thing?
So
Oh, boy.
the death of the son, when he is bringing him back to life, he spreads himself out over him, or he stretched himself upon the child 3 times. Now the funny part to me, when we were reading this on Atheist Sunday School, the translation, like, okay, so it was, and he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Oh my God!" And that was just very, very funny to us.
Are you sure he wasn't a Catholic priest?
He might have been. Maybe that's where they got it.
I think they
God.
like them a bit more sprightly.
That's where it all started.
I
mean,
did have a question. Is it interesting that this great prophet, his name is literally like the most Yahwistic name you could think of, like Eliyahu, like my God is Yahweh.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the
That makes sense.
pronunciation, because obviously L, right? But and then
Yeah.
Yah was supposed to be the abbreviation for God's name, and this has a J in it, but we don't pronounce the J, so it's Eliyah.
It's Eliyahu
Well,
here.
It's
And then-
Eliyahu.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
God's
there is
name
also
is actually Yahoo.
and there is also
but-
Eliyah. It's a variation of the name, but in this chapter it's
so
Eliyahu.
so Eliyahu is the Hebrew, and then the Greeks would have written it as Eliyah to make it shorter, I guess.
So this is like his
the-
name is deity
Yah.
God or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much. It's
Yeah.
you got to
it-
remember, as we pointed out, El can be a specific god, El Elyon or El, depending on when you're writing and what about, or it can just be a generic term of divinity, sometimes plural, Elohim. So it's
Yeah,
in this case, it's my God is Yahweh, this particular God.
Yeah, I think it's literally my God. It's like El is El, and Eli is my God, or El is God, generic. Eli is my God, and then Yahu is a variation of Yahweh,
Eli
which
being
is one of the reasons why we
possessor.
think it's Yahweh and not Yehovah.
Yeah.
Right. So what would have gone like Eliyahu to Eliyah in the Greek, and then by the time it goes through all of those, Latin, French to English, the letter I becomes a J that represents a Y sound as opposed to a E sound, and then at some point in French and English.
And that's how we end up with Jehovah.
And by the way, since you mentioned Jehovah, I mean, I thought, for anybody that doesn't know, I thought for a long time, and I know you guys know, I'm telling the audience, I thought that since there was the name Jehovah written out some places, and then we have the Tetragrammaton, which was supposed to be that you don't know what the vowels are between the consonants, as what was explained to me, it made sense to me that the consonants matched with Jehovah, Yahweh. That's how you would read that. I thought that was a good way to read that. I have, since I was corrected on this a year or so ago, I have not said that since, because that's what you do when you get corrected.
Yeah, it's difficult when you're reading the Hebrew with the pointing, because
otherwise you just keep saying no. That American vet was an immigrant.
You have intellectual maturity and integrity and care about truth, so you're obviously not in politics.
Yeah, I think it's because, like as you said, the Tetragrammaton is just these 4 consonant sounds, and it doesn't have any pointing, but the Masoretics added pointing to kind of remind the Hebrew reader which epithet to use instead. So if it had Yehovah, then it was supposed to be pronounced as Adonai, which means Lord, right? And if Yehovah, then it should be read as Elohim, which also means God, in the majestic plural or whatever.
I hate to interrupt. I don't know if
that's where it comes from.
I don't know if Peter has this comment up, but Jesus Tales has a very good observation here. The name Elijah or Elijah inverts the message of Exodus 3:15 and 16. Yahweh is Elohim. Elijah means my God is Yahweh. So it's again the tying together of multiple God concepts and names and words so that you can use all of them for yours and still maintain the illusion of it's one God and it's our God. And you do what we say and bring us food and gold.
It could be, that it's trying to combine El, the God, with Yahweh, but it could also just be read as Eli, my God, generic God is Yahweh. It could be read in a sort of not a monotheistic way, but in a henotheistic way, where it's like, El is a real God out there, but my God is Yahweh.
Well, considering the stuff we're gonna get in the next chapter, where they are competing against the prophets of Baal, it also does make sense in that henotheistic context where it's like, no, my God is Yahweh, your God is Baal, my God is Yahweh.
That's what I'm saying. Like that, the fact is that this character has this name. It seems very fitting, and almost literary, if that makes sense.
Help me out one more time with the pronunciation. Is it Eliyahu?
Eliyahu.
Eliyahu is the Hebrew reading of his name.
How would I know that when I look at the word that reads to me as Elijah, how would I know that I'm supposed to put a who at the end of that?
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't. Because the Hebrew has both. Hebrew has both, and the English always kind of knocks off the who.
Yeah.
Like Jeremiah, for example.
And I wasn't trying to make up this joke. It just came to me. Just when I see the word Elijah, I'm supposed to say Eliyahu.
Yes.
I mean, yes,
you're not supposed
but there are
Homer.
Well, yes, but there are instances. There are Eliyahu. There are instances where it is Eliyah. So
is that like a different
different variation?
Okay, Yahoo is Cindy Lou Who's father. Thank you, Randy Scott.
Okay, my unfinished
Jeremiah
journey.
Jeremiah is Yirmiyahu. I don't think he's ever called Yirmiyah, but it's possible, I guess.
I think he's
also got like Isaiah is Yeshayahu.
Okay, we'll get to the other kooks later. Let's get to the drunk homeless man in the woods.
There's a comment though.
Okay, my unfinished journey offers $6.66. It says, "Hail Nero, hail Aaron and Panel, and down with mind-numbing rationalization of horrific Bible stories." Yeah, we're not here to rationalize.
I mean, It depends.
Huzzah!
I mean, you can rationalize some Bible stories. I mean, it might not be, but it can, like...
You can rationalize that they happened to some degree. You can't rationalize that they're good. Well,
No,
not if
I
you
mean,
don't want to be a
not that they're
monster.
good. It's just you can rationalize why they thought that it was good. At least that's what I'm trying to say.
Or why they wanted to sell that narrative. Yeah, fair. We do.
I
do
get what
that.
you said, Tomer, about the value of literature from, if nothing else, an anthropological, archaeological perspective. I get that. I mean, I got a degree in anthropology. That's I completely get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I'll start on verse 1. Eliyahu the Tishbite. I will say Elijah because Elijah is identified as the Tishbite, in Hebrew Hatishbi, from Toshavei Gilad. Although traditionals wrote that Elijah was from a town called Teshuv or Toshav, we have no information regarding Tishbe in the Bible or in ancient Near Eastern texts. We find a reference to Tishbe, which is to the quote, Tishbe, which is to the south of Kedesh Naphtali in Upper Galilee, above Asher toward the west, and north of Fogo, end quote, in Tobit 1:2. But Sweeney writes that this can hardly refer to Elijah's Tishbe because of its location and the relatively late date for the composition of Tobit in the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE. Cogan notes an early Christian tradition which identified Tishbe with El Istib, 13 kilometers north of the Yabok on Jebel Ailun, in the vicinity of which there is a chapel named Mar Elias. However, McKenzie writes that this identification stems from the Byzantine period, when the chapel to Mar Elias was built. DeVries suggests vocalizing Toshavei, meaning settler, and thus Elijah the settler from the settlers of Gilead. And Sweeney comments, the term is well attested in Aramaic as a reference to a foreigner who settles among an indigenous people. This has fueled speculation that Elijah is a foreigner who identified with Israel, for example, Walsh. The Transjordanian territories of Gilead were frequently under threat by foreign powers, including Aram, Ammon, and Moab. Indeed, the Mesha inscription indicates that the territory of Gad and Reuben was conquered by the Moabites in the mid-9th century BCE. Likewise, Joshua 22 indicates that there were questions within Israel as to whether these territories were fully loyal. From the perspective of Ephraimite hill country, the people of the Transjordan might very well be viewed as foreigners. End quote. Oh, and there is a quote comment by Rashi, based on Talchumas Sanhedrin 113a, who explains why this story is placed after the notice on Hiel in 1634. Quote, Eliyahu and Achab went to console Hiel in his mourning. Achab said to Eliyahu, is it possible that the student's curse was fulfilled, while Moses, our teacher's curse, was not fulfilled? As it is stated in Deuteronomy 11, 17, and 18, and you turn away and serve other gods, and bow down to them, Adonai's wrath will be aroused against you, and he will restrain the skies, and there will be no rain. End quote. Now all Israel are worshipping idols, yet the rains are not being withheld. Immediately Eliyahu said what he said.
Yeah, so he's saying, is the student, as in Joshua, the student of Moses, why was his proclamation against, about what will happen, why is that coming true? But what Moses said about, if we were to worship idols, there will be no rain. Why is that not coming true? And then straight away Eliyahu was like, well, no more rain. Jinxed yourself.
Yeah.
It's the Streisand effect, but with gods.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
God says, thanks for reminding me.
Okay, still on that verse, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years. Fritz comments, the background for this announcement of punishment is the worship of Baal, which interferes with Yahweh's claim to exclusivity. In the following narratives, the anticipated drought is understood not as being a natural disaster, but as a punishment caused by Yahweh because of the inappropriate behavior of the king. The whole cycle of narratives is thus placed under the will of God. Just as he can withhold rain and dew, he is also able to grant both things again. The drought belongs to the natural phenomena that caused severe harm for the people, since the absence of harvest and water threatened the basis of life. Human beings are helpless against drought. The text does not consider that the consequences of the drought not only concern the king, but also affect the rest of the people.
And this is what you end up with. You personify natural forces into gods so that you can tell stories, so that you can understand your place in the world. And the next thing you know, you forget that nature is even a thing, and you're, explaining why bowing to this, making this gesture to this rock instead of this rock is the reason why my children are starving, and not, the lack of rain. And it's exactly the same mindset, same religious mindset going on today. If there's a hurricane and it's because we let gay people exist. It's not because of the global warming that we're, ramping up with our military or oil rigs and actively killing ourselves with. No. It's because God doesn't like gays.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that religious thinking people seem to have is this sort of like, it's like a mixture of pareidolia and like nothing is a coincidence. And it's like everything that happens is a sign if you notice it. And I think it seems to be very prevalent with like all types of religious people.
It is, but there's a specific self-righteous, vindictive element to monotheistic religions in general, Abrahamic ones at least, certainly, where it's not just that God is in control of things in a kind of a vague, overarching, natural order, Zen sense, but, that he's on my side and he's going to get you and I'm going to watch and it's going to be your fault. Vibe is,
oh no, I got stuck in traffic. Oh, God must have a reason. I'm going to be late so I can go to work and late, and then my boss will say something, and then I'm going to say something to him, and he's going to go to church. I don't know, something silly like that.
You laugh. I was told stories like that all the goddamn time.
No, I was thinking of some extreme thing which I'm not going to say because
Jewish people say divine providence or hashgacha pratit or hashgacha pratis, depending on your accent. And it'll be like anything that happens, they'll like bring it up, and they'll be like, literally, like we'll say, most people say things like, oh, talk of the devil. They'll be like, oh, hashgacha pratit, like I was talking about you, and it's like nothing's a coincidence, and it's like very silly.
When that friend calls because you were gossiping about them, though you haven't spoken about them in 3 years. Yeah.
Okay, so on verse 3, hide in the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. We are not told about the reason for Elijah's hiding, but it can be assumed that following his declaration of drought, his life was in danger and had to hide from Achab and Jezebel, according to Rashi, Kara, Abravanel, and Cogan. McKenzie notes that the name Kerith resembles the verb hechrit, used in 18:4 for Jezebel's cutting off, quote-unquote, one of Yahweh's prophets, and in 18:5 to express Achab's hope that they will not have to cut off the animals. Thus, Elijah hides and avoids being cut off by Jezebel. The identification of the Kerith ravine is unknown. Fritz writes that the wadi is, quote, probably one of the tributaries from the East Jordan Hills to the River Jordan, end quote. Sweeney notes that the prevailing view is that Wadi Kerith lies to the east of the Jordan, which led scholars to identify it with Wadi Yabesh, which follows into the Jordan from the east opposite the southern boundaries of the Jezreel Valley. He writes
the dry wadi.
No, Wadi Yabesh. It's Jabesh. I mean.
Oh, okay. Okay, then that would be Gavesh.
It's Yabesh, right? Yes.
Okay.
Yabesh. Yeah. Okay. He writes that the eastern location, quote, is useful in associating Elijah with the Arameans, whose interests Elijah served, whether intentionally or not, by playing a role in the overthrow of the houses of Omri of Israel and Ben-Hadad of Aram, which cleared the way for Aramean domination of Israel during the early reign of Yehu, end quote.
Is there another character, like maybe in the Talmud, who lived in a cave and the ravens would bring him meat?
That's Elijah.
Isn't that Rashbi?
Oh,
And
maybe.
I
Oh,
know, I
maybe,
know,
yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Rashbi lived in a cave.
He lived in a cave, and then the water came to him, and ravens brought him bread and water. And then when and a tree grew with what are those called? They look like dry bananas. Not cherubs. There's a fruit that's like
Plantains.
no, it's not related to bananas. It's like
Okay.
it looks like a dried like. Ripe
Oh,
banana.
oh no. I know what you're cherub. No, it's charuv in Hebrew, but
Yeah.
I forgot the name of it in English.
And the ravens
Um,
were named Fafir and Namir.
Carob, yeah, it's carob in English.
Yeah, carob.
Those two ravens had
carob.
way too much sense to feed this idiot.
Yeah, it was a carob tree. That's a carob. Get very
Yeah, and
confused.
it all smelled of
Yeah, carob.
semen.
And then when it stopped growing, when he stopped
Because it
being
is.
fed, he knew it was a sign to come out or something like that. I think he was hiding from the Romans or something. So yeah, it's interesting how similar it is. Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, Rashbi was like 100 CE, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is Rashbi. Yeah. Okay. So on verse 4, I have directed the ravines to supply you with food from not ravines, ravens. Sorry. Yeah, I know. My brain was
ravines. That would be more miraculous. Yeah.
Yeah, it would actually. It would. Sorry, the ravens to supply you with food there. Okay. Hebrew for ravens is Ovim, which is taken by early translations, Gersonides, Abravanel, and modern commentators to refer to ravens. Cogan notes that there are 5 species of ravens in Israel, with the short-tailed Corvus ripidurus making its nest in the crannies around the Dead Sea and the Jordan Valley. He writes that the basis for this legend stems from the raven's habit of storing up food and feeding their young, who cry aloud when hungry. Fritz writes that the ravens, normally regarded as scavengers and aggressive, serve as carriers of food. Some, however, suggested taking Ovim to be a group of people. Kara suggested that Ovim are people from the town of Orev in the Jordan, based on Judges 7, 24, and 25. Kimchi notes that some, like his father Joseph, suggested reading Ovim as merchants, based on Ezekiel 27:27, those who carried on your traffic, in Hebrew, Orvei Ma'aravecha. McKenzie notes that some, like Gray, suggested reading Ovim as Arabs as an attempt to rationalize the miracle. However, Gray acknowledges that the feeding of a hero by animals is a theme in folk tales, and that it runs counter to the point of the legend.
Yeah, I would make a note that Orvim and Aravim is literally the same letters. It's just pointed.
Yeah. Okay, so on verse 6, Rav Yehuda in Talmud Sanhedrin 113a wrote that the meat came from Achab's slaughterhouse. Others, like Leviticus Rabbah 19:1, taught that they brought Jehoshaphat's table. Kimchi wrote that there is no reason to ask where the ravens get their food, Elijah's food, since they get the food from a kosher place because they bring it by the will of God.
It kind of reminds me of like in Harry Potter
God
where
set
they
up
talk
a
about
kosher deli.
transfiguration.
He set up a kosher deli, or maybe he just set up a little portal through to a kosher deli. He loads up the buds, he sends them back through the portal. They don't know what the fuck is going on, and then it's kosher. It's all fine. It's good.
But he chooses to send it by raven, not by dove, because reasons.
Ravens are bigger. Yeah, no.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think the fan-tailed raven is quite big.
Yeah, the way Lilith
ravens
was
are never
talking just there was really making me hungry for pastrami.
Yeah, this reminds me of like in Harry Potter where they discuss like, when you not apparition, whatever, when
apparate,
you like create, apparate is like when people move, but there's like a word for like when you create something from nothing, like a coin or food or whatever, and it's like you can't eat it, it's not real. You can't make food.
Conjure.
Like conjure,
they're conjuring.
Money and food they can't conjure. You can.
Yeah, but there is like fake money as well, like whatever it's called, Goblin Gold or whatever. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that. Like, oh, it's a miracle story. The ravens brought him meat and bread. It's like, oh, but did it come from a real place, or was it just like from nothing?
Magic god conjuration. I mean, he's supposed to magically conjurated manna all over the desert every morning.
Why do the ravens have to go somewhere to get food? Why do they have to bring food? Why doesn't God just poof food?
Because if you see the trick, it's no fun. Let God have a little something up his sleeve.
He didn't want to reveal the location, obviously. That's why he sent ravens with bread and meat. That was the complete
little pastrami on rye.
The ancient Israelite bird watchers, and they're like, oh, it's the rare meat bread carrying raven.
Yeah, somebody in a Wendy's somewhere. We've got blackbirds in the drive-thru again.
Is that a raven or a seagull? I can't tell.
So we got a comment from My Unfinished Sock, which I don't understand that name. I wish I did. Maybe I don't.
It's My Unfinished Journey's sock account.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. My Unfinished Sock, $2. Thank you. Don't mangle the Bible. Like and share instead. Thank you kindly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now the brook dried up in verse 7. Rashi comments, in order that he realized the need for rain and trouble himself to go into exile, for it was displeased for the Holy One, blessed is he, that Israel should be living in hunger. Yeah, that's it.
So nice. So nice of them.
Yeah. Okay, now on Tzarfata, in Hebrew it's Tzarfat. Commentators generally identify it with Ras Sarafand, located 14 miles, or I know what you're thinking, Isaac, hold on. Located 14 miles, or 22.5 kilometers north of Tyre, and 8 miles, or 30 kilometers south of Sidon. Sweeney writes that archaeological investigation indicates that it was founded in the Late Bronze Age, circa 1500 BCE, and functioned as a commercial port and industrial center for the production of textiles, pottery, agricultural produce, and the purple dye for which Phoenicia was famous. The city mentioned in 13th century Egyptian texts, specifically Papyrus Anastasi I, and was conquered by Sennacherib I in 701 BCE. In modern Hebrew, Tzarfat refers to France.
Yeah, Tzarfat. It's exactly the same spelling?
Yes, Tzarfat.
Right. And that's not a name from like the table of nations, right? It's
no.
I think so.
Huh. I wonder
love
how that
our chat, by the way. I love our chat so much. They're talking about what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen raven, and is it an African or European raven? Will they be carrying it on a line between them?
Well, was it that we're not talking about European ravens? These are.
I suspect, Lilith, you may be a nerd.
I have been entirely clear about this from day one. I don't know how it escaped you. Would you like me to wear a Zelda t-shirt or something? I'm sure I can get one.
I mean,
this is an African raven. The fantail raven is pretty dominant in East Africa and Western Asia. Well,
we're making
kind of along the Red Sea.
The Holy Grail, the Monty Python's.
Yeah, I know. It does mention European or African, right? It follows.
So I should note that the identification of Tzarfat with France is medieval, right? Because in Obadiah 20, Tzarfat appears also with Sfarad, which Sfarad is also the Hebrew name for Spain. And so because they were both adjacent to each other, like Rashi interpreted that he wrote that Tzarfat is France and Spain is España, and it could be that FRC consonants, something like that. But yeah,
and you could say that Rashi lived in France.
He did. He lived in Provence.
He didn't live in Francia though. I think he lived in
he lived in Provence.
Provence, yeah. Yeah. I think it's Occitania.
Whatever. Occitania, something like that. Yeah. So it's funny. Okay, so on that same verse, a widow. Chazal in Genesis Rabbah 98:11 taught that she was the mother of the prophet Jonah, who was from the tribe of Asher. Fritz writes that as a widow who could probably be recognized by her special clothes in Genesis 38:14, quote, the woman belonged to the lower social stratum, which suffered most from economic want since she lacked the means of social sustenance, end quote. McKenzie writes that the widow is the righteous counterpart to Jezebel. Quote, both are Phoenician, but the widow befriends Elijah, giving him water and bread, while Jezebel's efforts to kill the prophets of Yahweh lead to them being fed water and bread in hiding in 18:4 and 13. More important, the widow's act is one of faith in Elijah and in Yahweh, while Jezebel is faithless and an active enemy of Yahweh and his representative Elijah. On verse 10, would you bring me a little water in a jar? Rashi comments, he was unable to identify the widow about whom the Holy One, blessed is he, had told him. But he learned from Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, and he said, the one who gives me water to drink, she is the widow. End quote.
There were so many widows.
That's just but that's just entirely it's that version of it is a rip on the servant going to pick up a bride for Isaac and picking Rebecca, because the woman who says, yes, take water and I'll also water your camels, let him be the one you've chosen for my master's son, blah, 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 blah. It's practically the same phrasing.
I mean,
so
the servant, what's the servant called?
Eliezer,
yeah, which is similar-ish. Well, maybe not. I mean, it's like God is my help.
Everybody's named for gods these days. And so.
Yeah. So yeah, Eliezer is he was seen as like, like he doesn't come from Abraham's family, but he is seen like very high. He is viewed very highly in like later Jewish texts and stuff, and he's one of the, I think he's supposed to be one of the people that goes to heaven alive or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah, like Elijah or Eliyahu was sucked up by a tornado, and we're supposed to believe that he just shows up in heaven in full physical form. And I think, and this is an interesting thought too, because there seems to be there seems to be some belief in heaven as being a physical thing where we need physical bodies and all of that.
I mean, you're saying that, Aaron, but I've researched this today, like the tradition that Elijah is still alive, and he's the forerunner of the Messiah, along with Enoch. Actually, he also is described as,
which is why, which is why you always said it. Right?
There's in an apocryphal work, I think it might be called the Apocalypse of Elijah or something like that. That legit puts Elijah and Enoch together against Satan, and they have this big anime battle, and it's fucking great.
Does it drag on forever on close-ups of dramatic?
It may as well have. It may as well have.
They're like, and then they start chatting for half an hour, and then
but they have to flex and yell the whole time. Ah!
But yeah, the tradition kept up for a while. In fact, I think even what was it? I think Elijah, didn't he pop up at Jesus' resurrection too in one of the Gospels?
Oh, Elijah that's the Transfiguration. Moses and Elijah. This was before the death, but he takes his three special dudes up the hill.
No, I think Lawrence may be confusing this with a line out of the Quran. Because aren't Elijah and Moses both present? Well, I can't remember what that was. So there was something where there's Elijah and Moses both show up to witness something. What the hell was it?
There seems to be connections between them. Yeah.
In the Bible, it's the Transfiguration, because the law and the prophets, and also they're both ones whose bodies at least were taken to heaven, whether dead or alive.
I
Moses also meets a girl by the well, right? When he goes to Midian and he meets Zipporah.
Oh, that's Eliezer.
No. I'm talking about Moses when he goes to Midian.
Oh, He
I don't
rescues
think he
her
does the thing
from
with the. I don't think
shepherds,
he
though.
asks her for a drink, but he does.
No, she's
he
taken in by
helps
her
her.
father. He rescues all the
Yeah.
sisters from shepherds who are being.
Yeah. So there is something similar about that.
I want to correct myself. I didn't research this today. I researched it yesterday, and there is a midrash called Derech Eretz Zuta, which states that there were 10 people who entered into heaven alive, and these are Enoch, Elijah, Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, Hiram, king of Tyre, Ebed Melech the Cushite, Jabez, son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Batya, daughter of Pharaoh, Serach, daughter of Asher, and some add Joshua ben Levi.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sarach and Batya makes sense.
Okay, so on verse, I actually haven't finished the commentary.
No DEI in heaven.
Yeah. So I was still on the would you bring me a little water in a jar? So Sweeney writes that while the prophet's demand for food and drink from the woman seems entirely impertinent, quote unquote, because of the drought, it highlights the lack of food and water and the capacity of Baal or Yahweh to provide both. On verse 12, I don't have any bread. Hebrew Bible reads, Im yeshli ma'og. The word ma'og appears only here and in Psalms 35:16. Psalms 35:16 reads, with impious mocking grimace, in Hebrew, la'agei ma'og. Septuagint and Vulgate read, cake or bread. Traditionals render cake, according to Rashi, Kara, Gersonides, or round shape, according to Kimchi and Butseko, quoting Ibn Janach. Although this reading is favored by Cogan, Targum and Peshitta read, I have nothing. McKenzie writes that they are reading me'uma, taking ma'og in the Masoretic text as dubious, and its appearance in Psalms 35:16 is almost certainly an error, quote unquote. He writes that the me'uma fits better with the following qualifier, except a handful of flour. The reading I have nothing baked is favored by DeVries, Fritz, and Sweeney.
I like the JPS translates it as I have nothing baked.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean the English word cake, cookie, I think it comes from like the word for something that is cooked, I think.
Well, in this case, I don't think a loaf and a cake are much different. We're talking about a quick, small flatbread with, just oil and water and flour and essentially like a pita, so fried. A cake in this case might just be a smaller one. But she's basically saying, I have nothing but the last handful of food I've saved so my son and I can eat our last meal. And he still wants some of it.
It's a good thing that this mentions cake instead of cheese, because the nerds in our chat would so go about if, do you in fact have any cheese here at all?
There is cheese mentioned.
Cheesemakers.
But we saw that previously. It's like it's literally slices of milk or something. If I remember correctly.
Yeah. I'm assuming it's sort of a soft matzah style that you can make in a day with a bit of vinegar.
It's not real cheese. It's American cheese.
Okay, that is not cheese.
Slices of milk.
Those are slices of rubber.
Yeah.
No. Okay. On 13 through 16, Fritz comments, here the miracle does not serve the purpose of producing a surplus, but the feeding of the persons concerned. The famine is not removed, but the need of the widow and her son is eased in connection with the feeding of the prophet. Thus, the narrative is completely concerned with the personal fate of the individual. In this respect, it is quite different from the narrative of the bread from heaven in Exodus 16 in the desert, where the plight of the whole people is lifted by divine intervention.
I need to mention a comment in the chat, or a comment that was saved here. Atheist Carpenter says, half of us wouldn't be here if you guys weren't all nerds.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, if we were just reading and just going as fast as we could, it just wouldn't be a show,
Yeah.
I just wanted to. Aaron said earlier that what was it? You said he was sucked off into heaven.
Yeah.
No. I mean, if you've, I was
Stop
wondering
it!
because like if you've seen ghosts,
Have you never been sucked off to heaven, Isaac?
if you've seen the show Ghosts,
I have.
Yeah, and the younger ghosts teach the older ghosts that sucked off means going to heaven after, like, you're a ghost but you get sucked off when you fulfill whatever it is that the reason why you're a ghost. It's like they all can't wait to be sucked off. So I thought that's what you were talking about.
Okay, stop it. Save the blowjob jokes for the actual show on that topic. And Matt White, no, I do not eat cheese with my Christmas cake. Dishonor.
Yeah. Okay, so on verse 15, there was food for Elijah and for the woman and her family. In the Masoretic text, the Kere reads she and he vehu, and the Ketiv reads he and she, hu vehi. The reading she and he is attested in the Septuagint, Targum, and Peshitta, while the reading he and she is attested in Vulgate. Cogan writes that the Kere ordering fits the verb and she ate, vatuchal, whilst the Ketiv reading reflects Elijah's request in verse 13 that he eats first, and then she, and then her son. While most modern commentators follow the Kere reading, DeVries omits the mention of the prophet and writes that the ideological problem is the position of Elijah as guest. He writes that it is very likely, quote-unquote, that he, quote, was not originally in this line of narrative at all, as is shown by the feminine narrative verb at the beginning, end quote. And Josephus in Antiquities 8323 reads, she had food available for herself, her child, and the prophet.
Yeah, I mean,
you
it's
mean they
also
may have
could be
stuck
that-
their favorite prophet in on someone else's story? That's never happened before.
the different order could also be because the next word is and her household or and her house. So it would make more sense for it to be her and her house with her after him.
But she's just a
Even
widow
though-
living alone with
yeah.
her son.
It's
Although,
like the word before is feminine, the word after is feminine, so it's like should she come first or second to match the word before, the word after. They didn't know, so they put both in. Seems. Yeah.
I mean, Kimchi writes that because she is the main, she is the main concern. She is the one who is first. I mean, he writes that both
Right.
both
Okay.
he and she and him are the same thing because both of them ate, but because she is the main concern, I guess. Then even though Elijah came to her through the miracle, she is the main concern.
it still gives also the vibe of the sort of story that's passed around to motivate people to be kind to guests, especially ones of religious significance, no matter what it costs you, even if you have to starve your children during a famine. How many stories of, and it was, basically implied that this person they were kind to was an angel and then something good happened to them later. It's even in the New Testament, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. This sort of story is passed around to motivate people to be good, but also to make them easier to take advantage of for religious figures.
Okay, so on 17, the son became ill, he grew worse and worse, and finally stopped breathing. According to Talmud Sanhedrin 113a, Elijah already possessed the key to rainfall, quote-unquote, but because he requested the key to the resurrection of the dead, the child turned sick. Or something like that. Josephus, in Antiquities 8325, wrote that the child seemed to be dead. Kimchi notes that some say that the son didn't die, but rather his illness grew worse, that his breathing stopped, and the people did not see any sign of life from him, so much so that they thought he was dead. He writes, however, that the reading until he had no breath left in him is by way of exaggeration, and that he did in fact die. Sweeney writes that it is unclear if the boy actually died. He writes, quote, the narrative depicts the boy as gravely ill and near death, with no breath left within him. Elijah's action, therefore, is one of healing, end quote. However, many commentators assume that he did die. For example, McKenzie writes, quote, The absence of an outright statement that the boy died has spawned a good deal of discussion among commentators about the ancient Israelite understanding of death. The issue is moot as far as the present passage is concerned, since the context clearly assumes that the boy died. In addition to verse 17, which states that he ceased breathing, and the widow's accusation that Elijah caused her son's death in verse 18, in verse 22, the boy's nephesh, life or soul, returns to him in verse 22. There is also no doubt about the boy's death in the Elisha legenda in 2 Kings 4:20, which is the template for the present story. What is more, an important theological point driving the present story is Yahweh's power through the man of God over death.
Death is a process. It's not something that's just...
Depends. Okay, so the woman who...
You're decapitated or something. But like people who die of illness, it's, you know, deciding when in that process you're officially over the line is...
Yeah. They weren't very good at telling where a person was along that process. That's why some people were buried with little bells. So if they found themselves waking up in the coffin, they could get someone to
I'm
come
not dead! I feel happy!
I wondered like how that worked.
I knew somebody whose
like,
father died watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh, I thought it was going to be the flying circus, the
literally
funniest joke in the world.
He laughed himself to death.
Yeah,
oh my God!
Had a heart attack while watching the show. He laughed so hard that it caused him heartbreak.
You know that there is a Monty Python skit about that, right?
The
joke in the world.
The funniest joke in the world that kills people. It was used as a weapon in the Second World War. Oh my God! I'm sorry that he's dead, but that is a hell of a way to go.
I always wondered about the bell thing, and I've seen diagrams where they have like they would put the coffin in, and then they would put a pipe, and then in the pipe would be the string and the bell would be on top of the ground, so the string would be inside the coffin, so they could pull it. And like, I always wondered, like, so you wake up in this coffin, like, did it say they like carve into the lid like ring for service or something? Like, how did they know what to do?
I assumed that this happened frequently enough that people were aware and terrified of the idea, and so insisted on the bells. They would have known. Oh my God! Panic! Grab! Yank! Yank! Yank!
Or maybe they tied it to like their finger or toe or something, so when they moved it would.
But that's the thing about I mean, that's part of the reason for wakes too, especially in drowning cases. You can have a person go into kind of a quasi comatose state. It's named after Lazarus, the Lazarus effect, isn't it, or something like that?
Oh yeah. Where
you can have people that seem to be dead and then like wake zombies. Up and are like, "What's going on?" And you're like,
Yeah. Apparently, that's also the reason why Christians do a wake, right? They leave the body for a few days before burying, just in case.
And it's a mourning ritual. You can stay the night with the family and not be alone. It's important.
We got a comment from Ronaldo Martinez, who offers $3. Thank you. It says, "God and Jesus are the worst."
Valid.
Yeah, the worst roommates. Okay, so still in that verse, the woman who owned the house. This descriptive is somewhat unusual, given that she's depicted as very poor in the previous story. McKenzie writes that either the drought was so severe that it left a once prosperous woman, whose house is the only remnant of her prosperity, at the brink of starvation, according to Nelson, or that verses 17 through 24 report an incident that took place considerably later, after the drought, when the woman had grown prosperous enough to own a house. Fritz, however, writes that
she did have an unlimited supply of flour and oil.
Yeah, there was another story, which won't be until Elisha, where they sell the oil. But
that's later.
There were two sons. Yeah, it's a different story, but this miracle story. Being.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's face it, a lot of these are sort of copied.
Yeah, I know. That's the joke.
Yeah.
Stories crossbreed.
Fritz, however, writes that the story. Sorry.
No, someone wrote that the string was tied to a finger, so if the person woke up and tried to dig their way out, the bell would ring. Look up the phrase "dead ringer."
Oh.
Okay, so Fritz, however, writes that the story in verses 17 through 24 has nothing to do with the previous story, and was only placed in its current context by the transitional phrase "after this." He writes that the mistress of the house is not identical with the poor widow of the previous narrative. Likewise, Sweeney notes that many commentators, like Thenius, Jones, and Stefan Thiem, take verses 17 through 24 to be an independent narrative, because of its distinctive features. It lacks the introductory prophetic word transmission formula that introduces the narratives in verses 2 through 7 and 8 through 16. The woman is identified as the mistress of the house, but later is identified as the woman, and Elijah is identified as the man of God in verses 18 and 24 rather than the Tishbite. He writes, however, that the narrative is tied into the preceding narrative context, in which the characters of the widow and her son are introduced by the formula, and after these things.
Yeah, it could be a completely different family that is just a single woman and a son, and the first one was just supposed to feed him, and he's supposed to give us a miraculous pot, and the second one he lived with. It's just,
I mean, it's entirely possible
Yeah.
she just was left with a house from her husband, who is obviously dead and, couldn't sell the farmland during a drought. But there is also the possibility of cross-pollination with other stories. Elisha also has a second relationship where he also resurrects a widow's son, but that widow is rich, whereas this widow is poor. So there's lots of widow son stories sort of flying about. It's conceivable that there could have been a bit of.
I would say that the expression used in the Hebrew, balatabayit, is, yes, it means the owner of the house, but it's, at least later on, it becomes a synonym with like housewife or, a magnanimous hostess, almost. Like it could even mean that she is rich or whatever. Like, that's interesting. And there's even like a Yiddish like a word which is like it's balabusta, and it's the same. It's the same word, just with like a Ashkenazi pronunciation and a bit of change. And it literally means like a successful woman with like who's like a hostess who cooks well and looks after the household and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. On verse 18, did you come to remind me of my sin? We do not know what sin, aven, this refers to. Rashi comments, quote, before you came, they would weigh my deeds and the deeds of my city, and I was worthy of a miracle. But since you came here, I am not reckoned with as being worthy of anything, and my righteousness is not noticeable, end quote. Kimchi wrote that she feared that she has not properly served Elijah, and because of that, her sins are remembered and her son died. Fritz writes that her address reflects the fear that Elijah will be able to uncover known things, and that he will evoke punishment by Yahweh. DeVries writes that her theology of divine judgment is so erroneous that Elijah must act to refute it. Yahweh has established no cause and effect relationship between a person's sin and the calamities of life. McKenzie, however, writes that her iniquity, quote unquote, probably doesn't refer to a specific sin, but to the general human condition. He writes, quote, her fear is that Elijah's connection with Yahweh has served as a lightning rod, bringing divine scrutiny and consequently punishment to her in the form of her son's death.
It also makes sense that these aren't the same people, because like if she was a witness to the miracle with the grain and the oil, then why would she be suddenly questioning again at the end, where she's like, oh, now I know you're a prophet.
It's pretty easy if it's kind of like a monkey paw deal. Oh, we didn't starve because I helped you, but then my son died anyway, tragically, and the false hope and everything. It could be that, and obviously, if you're a man of God in any capacity, you don't want that narrative getting around, or people won't be nice to you.
Okay, on verse 19, the upper room, McKenzie comments, Elijah takes the dead boy to his room. The reason is unexplained, but a couple of possibilities suggest themselves. First, Elijah may wish to take advantage of his intimate relationship with Yahweh to cry out to him in private. His move upstairs, therefore, points to the seriousness of the situation and the intensity with which he will make an appeal. Second, one of the grounds for his appeal is that the widow has been hospitable to him in allowing him to stay with her, in verse 20. Taking the boy to the room that the widow has set apart for him is a tangible reminder to Yahweh of the woman's generosity toward his representative. The presence of Elijah and the boy alone in the room also highlights the role of the omniscient narrator, who is privy to the intimate details about what Elijah said and did there.
Privy.
Privy. Fuck English. Really. Seriously.
It also means a toilet, by the way.
Yeah. Privy, fuck all of it.
Privy.
Yeah, I don't like it. I really don't like it.
It's a good word to know, I'm saying, because it's also a euphemism for the bathroom.
Yeah, well, now,
which is a
but
euphemism
not
for toilet, which is a euphemism.
A euphemism, which is a euphemism. Yeah, good.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They all are.
Yeah.
spit
Okay.
and shit house.
Just remember, there are rigid, consistent rules to the English language that only have exceptions every other Thursday.
Yeah. Okay. On verse 20, DeVries takes verse 20 to be a secondary addition, since it makes three mistakes. 1, calling the woman a widow. 2, saying that the boy is dead. And 3, quote, allowing Elijah to voice the women's bad theology to the effect that Yahweh might actually kill little boys, end quote. However, this view is not shared among other commentators.
Yahweh's favorite thing is killing little boys.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not his. It would be on the list. If he did a
maybe
favorite
not
thing
necessarily
song, it would
killing
be.
them.
Seems that I think his favorite thing is making them appear dead so that the man of God can lie on top of him for a bit.
Yeah, set them on fire, put them in a wall.
I'm just saying, if he made the Julie Andrews song, dead babies would definitely be on his list of favorite things. I'm not sure what he would rhyme it with, but it would be there.
Oh, God. Oh, this is a good... English is confusing. It can be understood through tough, thorough thought, though.
Oh,
Yeah.
you bastard.
Yeah.
I love it. It's because it's a bastard language, because of the, the Norman invasion and the Latin education and the stuff with leftover bits of Greek and the Norse invasions and Celtic occasional incursions, linguistic. It's a matter of, okay, what root language is this word from? And then what are the rules there? That's English is
Why
mad.
why didn't we have Old English? Why? It could have sounded way cooler. Okay, so finally on verse 21, he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times. Hebrew for stretched himself out is vayit moded, from the root mem daled daled. Most early translations and traditionals render he stretched himself over the child. Gersonides wrote that by doing this, quote, the spirit which came from the prophet's organs came to the child's organs, end quote. And
Did he just say the spirit came inside him?
Oh, I hate everything about that. Oh.
Oh.
yeah, and moreover, quote, in the inner organs, such as the heart, the liver, and the stomach, the force of the spirit is more apparent. And Elisha prayed, and Elisha prayed that the spirit returned there, and especially to the heart, because from there it'll spread all over the body.
This is giving I became a necromancer to beat the necrophilia charge.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cogan and Sweeney call this.
It's not necrophilia. It's not necrophilia if you wake them up afterwards.
No.
He starts doing his necrophilia. It's like, oh shit, you're alive.
Yeah.
Now I'm so.
Yeah. Okay, so Cogan and Sweeney call this act sympathetic magic, quote unquote, with the latter writing that Elisha's act is a symbolic action in which the prophet takes the illness of the boy into himself, end quote. He writes that by placing himself face to face with the boy, quote, the prophet provides a means by which the illness is transferred from the body of the boy into his own, end quote. DeVries, however, writes that the act is not magic, but rather, quote, a typical symbolic act familiar to the prophetic movement in Israel, end quote. But the Septuagint has, he breathed on the lad 3 times. This reading is accepted by McKenzie, who writes that it makes better sense than stretching out on him 3 times. DeVries, however, writes that the Septuagint did not understand the rare Hebrew form.
That would wake me up. I mean, I can imagine prophets have like bad breath.
So when he breathed on the lad, obviously
it's an alternative to lying on him.
Well, he's not breathing in, which would be like sucking. Well, he's breathing out, which would be like blowing.
Oren, what is your upbringing actually is? I such.
He's just spent too long reading the news about exactly what religious leader has gone to jail for what, and we all go there because.
By the way, the obvious reason why he went upstairs to pray and to do this is because you need to be as close to heaven as possible, and God can't hear through.
Better reception.
Roofs. Yeah.
Yeah. God has not upgraded to 5G in this narrative yet, so he's really the reception is very spotty. Very spotty.
I wonder if Flat Earth Jesus needs mobile towers and can't hear from from sky.
You can't pray. I cut off your Wi-Fi.
So what verse are you up to, Tomer?
I finished it, but we have Christians as well.
Oh, goody.
Oh.
Goody.
Yeah, just after we spoke about the whatever.
Yeah, so Ishodad wrote that the wadi signifies both the stream coming out of the sanctuary, where the sick are healed, and the baptism of the Lord.
Well, I hope it wasn't a stream coming out of the temple, because that would not be drinkable. Like, all the blood and guts. You wouldn't even need ravens to bring him meat.
Yeah. Augustine wrote...
You're like a sushi restaurant.
No, it would not.
I mean, also someone earlier said when he misread ravens as ravines.
Oh God!
Like the meat coming from the ravines would probably be lost hikers.
Yeah.
Why not at this point?
Speaking of the ravens, Augustine wrote that the ravens that took care of blessed Elijah at the Lord's bidding prefigured the Gentiles and their church.
Of course it did.
Oh
my God.
Yep.
What?
Yes. Yeah. And Ephraim wrote that bread represents perfection and justice accomplished together, while meat refers to the mortification of flesh.
Sure, Jan. Sure.
Okay. So anytime meat and bread is referenced together, that's a euphemism for heaven and hell. Okay.
Yeah.
No, the mortification of the flesh is what you must undergo in order to refine your spirit. So every time you have a sandwich, remember to beat yourself. Wait, don't I have a crop around here?
Aaron's like, why not both?
Yeah.
Don't get mustard on your leather, kids.
That's why God gave you 2 hands. So you can have a sandwich. Well, whatever.
Yeah. Augustine wrote that the widow, whom Elijah meets on arriving at Zarephath, symbolizes the future church of Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Have
Actually,
you noticed it's always the same excuse?
oh my God, they're right though. They're right. It did not the priests of the future Church of Christ also lay on boys and breathe the Spirit into them?
Oh God.
A lot.
And the church invited those
You're
men into
muted,
their
Aaron.
house.
The priest lays on the boys and says, "Oh my God."
Oh God.
It was a prefiguration. It did happen a lot. So there you go. Okay.
The widow represents the church, and who invites the men of God into their house to lie on the boys or whatever. Interesting.
Augustine again wrote that the widow is gathering sticks, which signify the mystery of the cross, and Elijah asks her for water, which foreshadows baptism in Christ.
Oh, I thought it was going to foreshadow
Because
Jesus asking
fire
for
and
water.
water are not the most necessary. Fucking okay, sure, why not?
Yeah.
And finally, Ephraim and Augustine wrote that in his action of stretching himself on the child 3 times and crying out to the Lord, Elijah foreshadows the mysteries of baptism and the resurrection in Christ.
Okay,
I
I
was
have
gonna-
been
I was gonna say-
baptized, and no priest laid on top of me or cried out 3 times.
I was going to say it's a good thing Elijah wasn't a Mormon, so he would have done like a post-mortem baptism.
No.
The dead. I wonder
Yeah.
if there's any kind of a charm that negates that you can be buried with, so the baptism just won't take even if you're dead. An anti-Mormon charm. I should sell those. Those would be fun. People with really annoying Mormon relatives could get them.
Yeah, I'm done. No,
All right.
No more.
All right. So I'm going to venture a wild guess
No.
that as it is 2:00 and the next chapter is stupid long,
Yeah.
that we're probably not going to do that one today.
No.
Okay.
Probably not.
All right. So 1 Kings 18 next week.
Yes.
Oh my God, he said the right number. Okay. Yeah.
I said the what? How was it? I always say the right number.
In some convoluted way.
Well, thank you. I just wasn't being very witty in the moment. I'll get better.
But make sure to join the Discord. We've been having a lot of interesting talks in Bible stuff.
Bible stuff. Yeah, I'm there. I'm there as well.
Yes, it's very interesting, but also very not very hard to follow. But it's it's some highbrow talk going on there, but it's very interesting.
Mostly between Chrissy and Simone.
Yeah.
Chrissy should come back on. In the chat, she said she had an awesome Zelda nerd t-shirt, so I think Chrissy should come back and wear the Zelda nerd t-shirt. Come on.
I think she will come back on Job.
On Job, perhaps. But...
Yeah, perhaps.
Yay!
Yeah, I'm gonna have so much fun with Joe.
Put this somewhere.
Yeah,
we already have somebody who joined. Thank you, Rainbow Love.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, join the Discord. Some of us have been talking about trying to restart the gaming sessions, and after the Christmas and New Year's streams on the line, it gave me the idea that we could probably try and do that stuff that they did. What was it called? Gamebox, something like that. Whatever.
Jackbox.
Oh yeah,
Jackbox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are pretty fun.
That could be fun.
You mean we can hang out and play video games?
Yeah, just like
Exactly.
real nerds.
Yes!
Also, make sure to subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists. I don't know when it'll be done because I'm doing a lot of research for it. But I'm doing a video on Melchizedek and basically history of the tradition, right? And maybe once I'm done with all the research, I'll come to a conclusion about what the whole thing was actually about. Because they do use it in Hebrews. They talk about the order of Melchizedek.
Yeah, but that's once the myth had already grown.
Well, no, yeah, exactly. But
Mm.
I'm gonna be covering, I think, a lot of really cool stuff.
Sounds fun.
So I'm almost done with this book, the Melchizedek tradition. It is pretty interesting. This is from Fred Horton, but he covers a lot of very cool early interpretations of Melchizedek. So it's going to be, I might try to get Kip on to talk about the Melchizedek scroll from Qumran. But I'll see once I get there. I think it'll be pretty interesting.
Okay. Thank you all very much. See y'all next week.
Bye.